Okay. And if you would like to join us, Council Member Griffin is going to lead us with an invocation and pledge of allegiance.
I would like to ask Rabbi Michael Davies of Congregation Dor Tikva to provide the invocation tonight, and would also like to thank him and the Charleston Jewish Federation on behalf of the city for giving us an opportunity to support their work in our community. Before he gives the invocation, I'd also like to honor and say thank you to Holocaust survivor Joe Engel, who's in the audience tonight. Thank you, sir, for fighting your fight, and we are honored to have you tonight. If we could give him a round of applause, please.
In less than a week, the Jewish community across the world will be celebrating the holiday of Passover. This Friday evening, Jews from across the world will be getting together for the Passover Seder, the Passover meal, among the most celebrated Jewish holiday traditions of the entire year. What does the Seder look like? Well, of course, there's food. There's always food at Jewish gatherings. But there's also the telling of a story. The story of slavery in Egypt thousands of years ago, and the exodus from that slavery into freedom and into the service of the Jewish nation. Now, traditionally speaking, those around their Seder table would reenact that exodus, perhaps by carrying a satchel on their back or by carrying a walking stick. In my home, it looks more like a scoreboard with two teams debating the different questions and discussions around the details of the Passover Seder. Why do we perform this tradition in such a way? Because the Jewish nation does not believe in history, but in memory. We remember, and the way that we remember, the way that we transfer from that history to memory is through our speech and through our actions. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the city, this council, and the mayor. Thank you for allowing us tonight to make a proclamation to remember the Holocaust. Thank you for caring so much for our survivors who are fewer and frailer as the days go on. Thank you for all the support of our Holocaust Memorial programs, and especially for the co-sponsorship of this coming Holocaust Memorial Day event, Yom HaShoah at the Gilead. So I ask us all here in this room and across the world to remember that right has sovereign over might, to remember that freedom and justice must belong to all and not some, and that all human beings are equal, as we learned in that Exodus story so many years ago, and in the reflections on the Holocaust not so long ago. And that we should remember these things not just in thought, not just in our heads, but in word and in deed. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Rabbi. And we have a few presentations and recognitions to make this evening. Before I start, I would just advise everyone that in the most unlikely event that we needed to vacate the building, these are our two main exit doors from this room, although there is an exit from the room to the right. Do not use the elevator in that event. We'd use the two stairways going down and then the one stairway out the front, just in case of that unlikely event. Wanted everyone to know where we needed to go. Okay, so first we're going to have a proclamation about Holocaust remembrance, and I'd like to invite Sandra, Brett, all the representatives from the Jewish Federation and Rabbi, but most importantly, if I may say, Joe Engel, a Holocaust survivor, to join me please on the stage. God bless you. Thank you. So if I may proclaim, whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 45, and whereas we remember with sadness the 11 million people, including 6 million Jews, who were victims of Hitler's, quote, final solution, along with those who were persecuted for their religious and political beliefs, sexual orientation, and physical disabilities. And whereas we remember with admiration the resistors and rescuers, known and unknown, who risked and lost their lives to save others, and whereas, and we have one of those right here with us tonight, and whereas we remember with respect the survivors who escaped, were sheltered, or who were freed, and who lived to contribute so much to our community and to our world, whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and whereas we have an obligation to ensure that the memory and legacy of lives lost or forever changed in this horrific event are never forgotten, and whereas I encourage all citizens to remember the victims of the Holocaust and to join in the Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance Program events commemorating the Holocaust. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, on behalf of City Council and all our citizens, do declare Holocaust Remembrance Day on Thursday, April 12th, and additionally do proclaim the week of April 8th through the 14th to be days of remembrance in memory of the victims, survivors, rescuers, and liberators of the Holocaust here in the city of Charleston. Rabbi, can I give this to you? So, I'll ask Sandra and Mr. Engel if they would like to say some words, but before I do, I want to just briefly commend again and again Joe Engel. What a hero we have in our midst. If you know his story as a captor and a rescuer and a freedom fighter from this era, from the Holocaust era, and thank God he made it to Charleston, because you've been such a valuable part of our community, Joe, ever since you came here. So, and it's been recognized for some time. Mayor Riley and City Council years ago proclaimed that there be an Engel Street in Charleston. It's right off of King Street, up above the crosstown, and or in between the two overpasses. And when I became mayor, I ran into Joe at I think at the Holocaust Remembrance event that year, and he said, "You know, Mayor, there's more than one Engel around, so somebody might get confused. Maybe we ought to put Joe Engel on the sign, you know." So we did that. It's still Engel Street, but we put a little caption on top of the sign that says Joe Engel Street. So life went along well, and Joe does this incredible job of going to schools and teaching and keeping the memory of the Holocaust alive, right? And so I saw him the next year, and he said, "You know, Mayor, they may forget about the Holocaust, and we can't let that happen. Could you do that sign one more time and put Holocaust Survivor on the sign?" And we just recently did that. So y'all go up and take a look at the sign at Engel Street. It says Joe Engel Street, Holocaust Survivor. God bless you, Joe. Would you like to say a few words, please?
I want to thank everybody here who came here this afternoon, or you want to call it tonight. Either way. And I thank you very much, because if I have to stay here and tell you my story, it would take too many hours in too many days. So we want to thank you all very much. And I'm choking up, so and thank you very much.
Oh, yes. You want to?
So I want to add my thanks on behalf of the Charleston Jewish Federation for all the support that the city of Charleston has given us all these years. As we know, good governance is so important to remembering what can go wrong, as what went wrong in the 30s. So again, my thanks to all of you who are governing the city of Charleston. And as you light your candles, I would like to read the blessing of the yellow candle. We light this yellow candle to rekindle God's flame, to shine His light upon the world once again, to sanctify the memories of the millions of souls, to honor their prayers and all their lost goals. We bless their existence by being alive to light this yellow candle as proof we survived. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure to see you. And next, I'd like to invite Louise Williams, Sid Boone, and Frecia Emmons from the American Red Cross to join me up here. Thank you so much. Hey, Frecia. Good to see you. Hey, Sid. So, I think y'all know what a remarkable job American Red Cross does, not only in times of big tragedy like a hurricane coming to town, but even when there's a house fire and someone is dislocated from their residence for a short period of time or a long period of time, the American Red Cross steps in to help folks in need in our community, in addition to the amazing work they do with blood banks and all like that. So we have a proclamation for them as well. It's American Red Cross Month in the month of March, which is about to end up, and I'll just share with you that in 2017, American Red Cross saw a record-breaking year of challenging domestic and international response efforts through the support of its volunteers. In just 45 days, the Red Cross responded to 6 of the largest and most complex disasters, including back-to-back hurricanes, the deadliest week of wildfires in California history, and the horrific mass shooting in Las Vegas. In addition, they responded to nearly 50,000 home fires last year, providing casework assistance to help 76,000 families recover. In the Lowcountry, they have a long history of helping our neighbors in need. Our local Lowcountry American Red Cross chapter assisted with more than 430 local disasters in the past year, installing nearly 6,700 fire alarms with partners and handling an average of more than 2,700 emergency military calls every year, and collecting an average of 30,000 units of blood from generous donors. So we dedicate the month of March to all who support their mission to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. Our community depends on you, depends on the American Red Cross, which relies on donations of time, money, and blood to fulfill its humanitarian mission. I encourage all citizens to support this organization and its noble humanitarian mission. So now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do proclaim March 2018 to be American Red Cross Month in the City of Charleston. And we thank you all very much. Louise, thank you. So you? Once again, would you like to make a few remarks? Yeah.
Just, Mayor, City Council, thank you. Whether you go back to Mother Emanuel shootings, the historic floods of 2015, Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Irma, and even our winter storms. The good thing that's come of these recent disasters is the partnership between the American Red Cross and the city. We do things together, we do things as a team to make this city more resilient. So thank you for your partnership.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Appreciate it. I'll get out your way. So we even work on things like homeless shelters and all like that. They're just an amazing group. So finally, we have a proclamation recognizing April, this coming month, as Child Abuse Awareness Month in the city. I'd like to invite Beverly Hutchison and Adria Shuford of D. Norton Child Advocacy Center to join me.
How are you? Good to see you.
So, well, maybe I'll share the story first. These folks do an amazing job as well. And I might get choked up because it was the morning of Heidi Todd's eventual recovery that I and Chief Tippett and Chief Taylor were at the D. Norton Center because Heidi's two older siblings were there to receive the news that their sister had been kidnapped. And we didn't know at that point whether she would be back with us or not. And the support that that y'all provided that family that I witnessed that day was just remarkable. And that was just one day. They do this each and every day, helping protect abused children, which is just an unfathomable thing to me, but they do a remarkable job. So, whereas children are vital to our state's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, as well being our most vulnerable citizens, and all children deserve to have safe, stable, nurturing homes and communities they need to foster their healthy growth and development. Child abuse and neglect is a community responsibility affecting both the current and future quality of life of a community. Communities that provide parents with the social support and knowledge of parenting and child development and concrete resources they need to cope with stress and nurture their children and ensure all children grow to their full potential. I urge all citizens, community agencies, faith groups, medical facilities, elected leaders, and businesses to increase their participation in our efforts to support families, thereby preventing child abuse and strengthening the communities in which we live. Communities must make every effort to promote programs that benefit children and their families. The D. Norton Low Country Children's Center serves the Charleston community by providing a one-stop location for services to be provided to families and children in need. And therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, proclaim April 2018 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the City of Charleston. And we thank you for all y'all do every day.
Since 1991, we have enjoyed a wonderful partnership with the city, so thank you. You have provided our home at 1061 King Street for all those years, and in all those years, we have been able to help 28,000 children and their families that have suffered some type of abuse. We are excited that in May, we're actually expanding, and that's because of the stalwart support of folks like the city. We're going to be opening a second full-service center east of the Cooper where we're not meeting the need, and we need to make sure that all children have access to healing services. April's all about, prevention. We're going to be out there. You're going to hear us talking. You'll see a billboard or two. That's our goal. Wouldn't it be great if no child was ever abused, if we really could prevent it? But our mission is three-pronged: prevent abuse, protect children, and heal families, because unfortunately, abuse does still occur in our community across all racial barriers, socioeconomic barriers, and I'm just grateful that Charleston is a place where children and families have a place to go. Because the one thing we know at D. Norton is children can and do heal if given the opportunity. And thank you for giving them that opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, before these ladies sit down, I want to say, first, I'm blessed to have the center in my district. Y'all does a wonderful job. And I know of a young lady that got 4 children that she adopted because they were abused. It's not her children. The mother wouldn't take care of them. She brought it to the D. Norton Center. Those kids are doing well. They're making good grades in school. And it's all because of the fine work y'all do at that center. And I am very proud of you.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have a number of public hearings. I think we have 8 or 9 of them this evening. and I believe Mr. Morgan will be introducing those to us. And any citizen can speak on any of these matters. I'd ask if you'd please limit your remarks to 2 minutes if you could, just in the interest of time. If you were here not to speak on any of these public hearing matters, but just some other general matter, and wish to speak during our public participation period, there was a sign-up sheet out front that I believe you could still sign up on if you want to speak on any other matter before council tonight. So the first matter is a zoning ordinance change of a property West Ashley, 1551 Mulberry Street. As soon as we get the screen all set up, we'll let Mr. Morgan take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As you said, this is 1551 Mulberry Street. It's in West Ashley. It backs up to the West Ashley Bikeway. You can see that as the green stripe going through the map here. It's surrounded by residential development, and I've got some slides that will show you some of the differences that are going on in the neighborhood. The applicant had requested CT, commercial transitional. I think the applicant is interested in having more options with the property. Staff had recommended single and two-family residential, which we call STR, not to confuse with our STR discussion about short-term rentals, but single and two-family residential. And that is what Planning Commission recommended for. I'll show you some slides here. Again, this is an aerial of the site. Here's the West Ashley Bikeway going behind the property. Some of the closer-up images of the property here. And we see the subject property here. It's an older house that I believe a church owns now. Here's some of the surrounding adjacent small apartments that show the diversity of the residential types in the neighborhood. There's the adjacent church and some adjacent single families. So the neighborhood is very much mixed. We were comfortable with a single and two-family residential designation for the property, and that's what we recommended and Planning Commission recommended approval of.
So I guess because the original request from the applicant was for commercial transitional, and the Planning Commission recommended something different, that this will require a 3/4 vote of council, just to make everyone aware. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, the matter comes to council.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move for approval, but can you go back to the pink house, please?
Yes, sir.
Right. This is a very important, this, believe it or not, has been a learning center where summer programs has been going through for in excess of 20 years. Owned by Reverend Christian King. In 1998, they got a use variance that runs with the property. So if they want to continue to use it as this was the community center, believe it or not, for Ardmore Sherwood Forest. I'll touch on what we're going to vote on next, but that use variance was amended in 1999. So what I was concerned about is their ability to continue doing what they have done in the past. So this zoning that the commission approved, I spoke to Reverend King today. She's fine with it, realizing that the use variance follows the property. So staff was enabled me to have the paperwork going all the way back to 1999 and 98. I provided that to Reverend King, so I'm fine with this zoning recommended by the Planning Commission.
Councilmember Jackson.
Mr. Waring, because that was the first question I wrote on the margin of my paper about couldn't this have some sort of appropriate use designated that would fit into the overall zoning, but yet allow the church to do their good work, so, good.
Thank you for your consideration. They're still going to be able to do it. Right.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We had a second over here. Okay. I think actually Councilmember Gregory had seconded it already. Yeah. He might not have heard him. All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Number 2.
Okay, and this is 1506 Balsam Street, also in West Ashley, also along the Greenway on the southern side of the Greenway, the Bikeway, on the southern side of the Bikeway, again, in a very diverse neighborhood that has single-family houses, apartments, duplexes, things like that. We've got a couple of images here. You can see there's a duplex immediately adjacent. There's also a duplex at the end of the nearby street, some vacant lots, some single-family, so a real mix in that neighborhood. Again, we feel like some of these changes to zoning will help revitalize the neighborhoods by giving more opportunity for renovations and new uses on the property. This is a property that both staff and Planning Commission recommended for the STR, or single and two-family residential classification.
All right. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Yes, sir. Please come forward, to the microphone, state your name and address.
My name is Joe Ankrum Jr. That lot there belongs to me. And it was there when we bought the property and the land is sitting there. I just want to try to build 2-unit home there. That's it.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move for approval.
We have a motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor?
I appreciate Mr. Ankrum reinvesting in that neighborhood, so.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And by the way, if y'all haven't seen the redo of the bikeway, the West Ashley Bikeway from Highway 61 over to Playground Road, which was done as part of our drainage project there, it looks great. It really looks good.
As we even going to invite Councilman Seekings to come over and ride his bike.
All right, number 3.
Okay, this is property at 1555 Juniper Street and an adjacent lot. It's requesting rezoning from single-family SR2 to the single and two-family residential. It's not far from the other properties we were looking at earlier tonight. This is a property that the city of Charleston's working on for workforce or affordable housing in this location. Again, it's a part of the neighborhood that has a diversity of uses around it. You see a duplex immediately adjacent to the west. You see a duplex across the street, a duplex around the corner and to the rear. So clearly, it's a neighborhood that is not just single-family, and with that, we are comfortable with the diversity of uses to recommend for the single and two-family residential here, as well as did Planning Commission.
Great. Terrific. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, it goes to council.
Approval. Second. Mr. Mayor, discussion. Mr. Morgan, can you go back to the overhead shot by the Pink House showing the 3 units that the church owns across the street? Yeah, go back a little bit more.
There you go.
Right there, okay. These 3 units are owned by James Chapel. It's very unique, out-of-the-box thinking. I certainly appreciate the help of the mayor, staff, and office of council. Ardmore Sherwood Forest is a neighborhood that goes from Savannah Highway all the way through to Highway 61. It encompasses thousands of people. It's been built probably in the 50s. Never had a playground. So, I mean, some of the kids actually play at the end of a cul-de-sac in the street. So what the city, and hopefully we are doing, is entering a agreement basically to put a playground right in where these 3 buildings are, and the property to the left. Those will be torn down. And then when you go back to the site under discussion, Mr. Morgan, on Juniper Street, right. That's Balsam. On Juniper Street, there we go. That's where affordable housing is going to be. So the church is willing to work with us. They have 3 affordable units now. They wanted to keep the mission of having affordable housing as part of the church's mission. They're considering swapping with us, basically, their site for this site. As opposed to just selling the property and leaving the mission of affordable housing. So affordable housing obviously includes many different entities. So this is a unique opportunity to create a playground and a safe environment for the community and continue and enhance, quite frankly, affordable housing, not only for the church, but there's going to be a benefit for the city as well to create a few more affordable units.
Right.
So I move for approval and appreciate all your support. And thank you for your help, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. And you might know by Councilmember Waring's knowledge of this, that this was his good idea. So thank you for bringing it forward. Yes, ma'am.
Again, Mr. Waring, I really would salute you. I think that this kind of, people talk about affordable housing, and we all think big, which is good, but those little properties that can be redeveloped and traded around and used for better purpose inside the people's neighborhoods, we never hear about those. So the fact that you've got your ear to the ground and are working with the community to be that creative, I salute you.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And number 4.
This is a property on Ashley River Road, right near I-526. You can see Ashley River Road running to the northwest here, I-526 crossing over in an elevated portion. It is across the street from a large multifamily complex that's zoned DR1F and limited business. Our city fire station is just down Ashley Hall Plantation Road in that location. There is a commercial property across the street from it in Charleston County, and then other residential properties in the area. The request is to go from the general office classification to diverse residential, DR9. DR9 is substantially less dense than the surrounding LB zoning or the DR1F zoning or the DR12 zoning in this location. So we feel like it fits in well with the area. It gives more options for use of development on the site, and both Planning Commission and staff recommend its approval.
All right. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, it comes to council.
Second.
Councilmember Shealy.
Yeah, just want to let you know, I have, it's probably a rare situation that we want more housing down Ashley River Road. However, I have spoken with the HOAs in the area, and everybody is in agreement. Well, not everybody, but the vast majority is in agreement that this is going to be okay. It's going to be 8 units, unless anything's changed, Christopher. I think it's only 8 units, which adds 16 cars to the traffic. It would have been an office with vehicles coming and going. And so, I would ask that we move for approval on this.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Number 5.
And this one, 651 meeting, the applicant has requested deferral, so I will just zip through the slides. We did discuss it at a previous meeting. It's adjacent to the trolley barn on Meeting Street, but it has been deferred by the applicant here.
Right, but should we have the public hearing anyway? Yeah. So would anyone like to be heard on the matter of 651 Meeting Street? Yes, sir.
Trenton Walker, 66 Hazel Street, here on behalf of the applicant. As Christopher said, it's been deferred. The applicant has met with the head of the neighborhood association, who recommended further meetings with residents that live nearby. So we're asking for deferral so that we can meet with those residents and sound them out. So we hope to be back in 2 weeks, but we're doing our field work first. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Would anyone else like to be heard? Okay, so it's deferred. We'll move on to number 6.
And this is a zoning of a recently annexed property in West Ashley, 209 Hickory Street, from R4 in the county to SR2, which matches the surrounding zoning in the city. Both Planning Commission and staff recommend approval.
All right. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? 209 Hickory Street. Hearing none, the matter comes to council.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Number 7.
The next one is 1430 Agatha Street. Again, a recent annexation. It was R4 in Charleston County. Recommendation of SR2, which matches the surrounding zoning in the neighborhood in the city. And both staff and Planning Commission recommend for the SR2.
SR2. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter?
Move for approval.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now, number 8.
Okay, and this one has been before you before and been deferred. This is a 17.13 acre parcel along Bees Ferry Road at the intersection of Blue Water Way, which goes into the Bolton's Landing subdivision. There is the Charleston County landfill just down the street from it. The property was zoned industrially in Charleston County, or is currently zoned industrially in Charleston County. And coming into the city, the recommended zoning is limited business. Both Planning Commission and staff recommend approval of the limited business for the property.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Yes, sir, you're back.
Trenton Walker on behalf of the applicant, 66 Hazel Street. I understand that the applicant has met with Councilman Wagner and talked it through to give everybody a little preview of this project. It's going to be multifamily. This property is now in the county, and you have a later agenda item to annex these 17 acres into the city. It's second reading only, even though it drains into Rantol's Creek. The new Church Creek stormwater regulations will be abided by, so that there will be 150% containment of the stormwater. In other words, 50% less stormwater will come off the site that comes off it now. And the site plan is working around all the grand trees. The surrounding area is residential, so we think it would be compatible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So Mayor, with this one, we want to make sure that we do the annexation first and then come back to
Right.
this. And you said it's only going to be.
It's only second reading,
Okay.
so we're going to stop before third. We'll have to come back for third reading, Vanessa.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. But we want to have some discussion. I saw Councilmember Wagner and then Shealy, then over here.
Go back to one
Councilmember
slide.
Wagner.
Yeah, go back to the big slide. There you go. Okay, you guys are familiar with Bees Ferry and the entrance to Bolton's Landing. All right, right now, when you turn into Bolton's, first thing you'll see on the right is now a senior living facility. It's just been completed. This is directly across the street. If you're coming in off Bees Ferry, it's the site right to the left. If you go one step behind it, you'll find about 300 apartments, which was the very beginning of Bolton's Landing. There are apartments back there. And it looks to me, well, no, there's no doubt what I was handed. There's some more apartments on that side. And it looks like it's going to be about 292 units, which means that side of the road is basically, as you going into Bolton's, that first half mile is 100% going to be apartments. Let no one be surprised if you see apartments there. And then the assisted living facility. Then you get into the single family, all the way up Blue Water Way, almost all the way to Savannah Highway, where, believe it or not, they built some apartments right on Savannah Highway, just about, coming back in from the other side. So, no surprise here that these are going to be apartments with approximately 400 spaces for parking. So there will be some traffic impact to Bees Ferry. No reason to lie, cheat, or steal about that. I mean, you know, put the facts on the table, guys. That particular end of Bees Ferry is, it can handle that particular additional influx of apartments up on that end. If it was on the other side now, we might have a problem, but or down toward the Walmart side of Bees Ferry. This is very close to almost a hunt club, okay, but it's on the opposite side of the street. Hunt club still being in the county. So just so you guys will have a visual of where we're looking at. And it's going to back up to another set of apartments. In other words, the whole first section is going to be apartments. And then before you get into the single family, and then there's some multifamily in there too, throughout Bolton. I've got two sister-in-laws that live over there, so if I mess this up, I'm gonna get killed. You know, their sister will hold me down and they will beat me. I mean, you know, happened before. I mean, I'm just kidding, girls, if you're looking, watching. But I would have told Hobie, I thought that it would be okay in this area. I was thinking all along that this was the area that had been pulled from the, 2 weeks ago. We had a section of it, and I was thinking it was this one, that we'd backed off of completely as a council and just, they wanted to pull away. And I don't know if that's true or not. Christopher, you sent a note.
There is another one further in your agenda that's further up Pease Ferry, that's up for, I believe, second reading. It's up closer to the Walmart. The 7 acres, the 7-acre tract.
Okay.
The 7 acres on the circle itself.
Yes.
That's perfect. I'm good. I'm good with that.
All right, Councilmember Shealy?
That doesn't have the same map number. I thought it did, and I'd have to go back and look at it.
Which one?
As, well, the one we're talking about here, that TMS number, and maybe I'm mistaken, I thought that was the same TMS number as was rescinded over at Dock Street back on February 26th. But I may be mistaken, but I thought that's what we...
He's thinking the same thing I was.
That was the annexation that moved forward in error, and so it was rescinded until the zoning could be set for the annexation to be finalized.
Okay.
At that meeting, they asked us to defer something, but they did not say defer the annexation.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just concerned about adding more apartments down that way. We've got a lot of growth that's getting ready to happen there, and we're going to have a lot more traffic congestion as we continue. The Glen McConnell's going to be widened, but as that happens, we're going to have heavier traffic problems up until that point. I understand this is at the other end, and some of these people are going to cut down and go down 17 to go downtown, but a lot of them are going to choose to go down the Glen McConnell Parkway where all this congestion is happening. Well, Savannah Highway's congested as well, and I think, in my mind, it's a great place to have a business spot to fulfill the needs of the community of all the other growth that's going on. So, just my opinion.
Councilmember Griffin and then Jackson.
I've got a couple of points. My first is a question. Why, if you don't mind telling me, why do they want to move forward with second but not third?
It has to do with the contract with the owner for acquisition. It depends on, if there's second reading, then the purchaser will proceed. If it's disapproved on second reading, then I think they'll probably abandon the contract.
So I'm going to agree with Councilman Shealy here, and I just want to make it known for the record that I am going to vote no to this, only because I don't trust necessarily somebody saying it doesn't drain to Church Creek. I like to see facts. I like to see documentation of that. For me to vote yes on this, a property this close to the 100-year floodplain, I can't say that without any sort of something to back it up.
And Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear the council members who, have a lot more experience and day-to-day knowledge of West Ashley. I guess my first question when I raised my hand was to ask Mr. Morgan, how does this kind of development and the rezoning to limited business away from industrial, how does that fit into the Plan West Ashley master plan that we're supposed to be cooperating with now?
And this was an area that was zoned industrially by the county. There were other parcels that were industrial, such as to the north here in the past, that we have annexed and turned to either residential or commercial and residential uses. I think it's in line with the Plan West Ashley concepts. It does give you some degree of density that can be along a road like Pease Ferry, which can help make bus routes function better. Obviously, this helps create the rooftops that can then populate the West Ashley Circle with the types of services that people have been looking for in the area. It is adjacent to other multifamily, so it's not completely incompatible with the surrounding area. This neighborhood had been planned to be a neighborhood of diverse uses. It's got the assisted living, as Mr. Wagner referred to, as well as some townhouses that are down here off Blue Water Way, as well as the single family. So it's a real diverse neighborhood as far as residential uses.
Okay, well, that all sounds positive. I guess my second question then was, as we're discussing development that adds hundreds of multifamily units, which we know that we need more housing, we know that we need housing that's more affordable than less. So obviously that's going to mean more dense housing in the right places. And I do think that we need to be very cautious about how we're connecting to the watershed. The first thought that came to my mind, though, in thinking about this was the transit, because we really can't afford, saying that cars are going to come down to 17 is just sending cars down to 17. And so I think unless we're planning as a set of big decision makers, that we're going to have transit that follows right along with these areas that we're changing over from industrial, which is very small traffic impact compared to anything that has residential with it. Then, so I don't know. This doesn't feel like it's the right time to me, and I might join you, Mr. Griffin, in voting no.
Councilmember Wagner.
Yeah, this is the first of three items on the agenda tonight that are basically affect the three of us. When Hobie did come to see me, and that is very true, we looked at this in detail. He gave me his maps. Nothing was held back. I did ask him, however, to talk to my two partners there, because what happens to me in District 5 happens to Kevin in District 2 and Harry in District 10. We share a common roadway. We back up to one another. And, real bottom line is, it's a triumphant, or whatever that wonderful word is that I can't really always get right. But it's almost impossible for anything to affect District 5 that doesn't affect one of these guys. And so we kind of got to get it together. Now, I would be perfectly content till these guys can see everything that I've seen, to defer it for another meeting, to where y'all can look at it. We'll go on a field trip if you want to where you can see exactly, feel it, see it, and touch it. If that's all right with my two council mates there. So, if that's all right with them, I'd like to move to defer it for 2 more weeks, and let's go from there.
Second. Motion to defer. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Councilmember Seeking.
What's the current zoning?
It's light industrial, and it would be converted to LB.
So what is the principal difference in terms of the densities of the build-out? It's pretty similar, right?
It's a district.
Christopher, I think you'd have to address that.
The county has some residential allowances in their industrial. Case in point, the development to the north was put together with the concept that it was industrially zoned, but then they were allowed to have commercial and residential uses, and then that ended up still coming to the city. So I know that there are residential allowances at the county level.
Well, personally, I think it speaks to a need for council to look at our own limited business and light industrial and heavy industrial allowances for residential use. If you're coming forward with an apartment complex, it seems like you should be requesting some form of multifamily zoning as opposed to limited business, or maybe, do you have a response?
That was discussed with planning, and because other properties along Beast Ferry had gone LB, the thinking was this was consistent with the zoning on Beast Ferry already. Other out parcels from this larger tract had been brought into the city annexed as LB, and staff felt good with that, basically.
Okay. Councilmember Griffin.
I just think that we're at a point now where we kind of have to draw a line in the sand. If I reach out to my district and I talk to everybody in District 10, they're not really too happy about Long Savannah right now. They don't know everything about it. And so for us to start approving more development when we have a huge project that is the centerpiece for what is making everybody upset, then we're doing a disservice for our constituents over there in West Ashley. There's no infrastructure. You're talking about another 500 cars. I mean, it's going to be detrimental to us right now. We need to, at the very least, defer it, but I'm going to have to start voting no on these developments because we just don't have anywhere for these people to go. I just can't imagine there being a need for this, and it doesn't sound to me like we're creating affordable housing, so for me, it's a no.
Any other comments? We've got a motion on the floor to defer. Councilmember Waring?
Well, the motion on the floor is to defer now, so it's not to approve. Right. The part about flooding, which I hear you, Councilman Griffin, on that. At this point in our process, can we get any definitive information on that? Because I'd like to know whether it's going to the Rantoul Creek versus Church Creek basin.
Mr. Waring, this map shows that a portion of the site is in the Church Creek basin, but none of it is in the flood zone, because the 100-year flood zone is the light blue.
Right.
And you can see the distance from it. It is in the a portion of it is in the basin, but none of it is in the flood zone that's subject to the moratorium.
So, I mean, all that's nice. When this thing is built, which way is the water going to flow?
And I think that depends on how they engineer the site. It's possible, I think, when you've got these things that are at the edge of a basin, if you change elevations and things like that, that it could flow somewhere else. I don't know what the final...
So right now, we really don't know which way the water's going to flow.
It could go either
Until
way,
the engineering's
depending
done.
on how you engineer it.
And we'll bring that information.
Have y'all done engineering on the drainage yet?
They're looking at it. I think they're looking at stormwater right now. If we have something, be happy to share it.
All right. Councilmember Shade?
No, I think that was the question I wanted to make sure that Mr. Walker would bring
Okay.
to us.
All
The
right.
information he had about the
Delighted to
stormwater
do it.
runoff and how that's going to affect.
Councilmember Shealy?
Any of that information that would be brought forward, I would like to see Weston and Sampson, well, Bob Horner in particularly, involved in that, since he's got so much information on this.
Jackson?
I guess I would just like to use this, it's not the be-all and end-all of how we're talking about our use of land in what I'm starting to say is, the end of the age of innocence for us in terms of how we know that water impacts the master plans that we have faithfully allowed developers to build out under. So I think we need to be more thoughtful about this topic, but I would join Mr. Griffin in saying that because we've had a zone in place in earlier years and for good purpose, that doesn't necessarily mean that because it's contiguous, we need to keep going with the same zone. So I do think it's great to have this time out, and I would hope we could have some educational discussions in the process.
Good. Councilmember Wagner, did you have a last word?
Yeah, that final road word, piece of paper, come on, talk to me. Piece of paper I'm looking at does show two rather large detention pond areas.
Right.
But it is not showing where it's going, but it is running towards blue water, and it's basically not telling me where it's going from there.
Okay. We'll get more information on that. Okay, we have a motion to defer. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And Mr. Walker, that would affect the annexation.
Yeah, we would like,
Deferred as well?
yes, we would like to defer the annexation as well to keep them on the same track. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, number 9 has been deferred, but let's go ahead, since we have a public hearing, see if anybody wants to talk about it. You want to at least share what it was about, Christopher?
And so this originally was a amendment to the tech corridor overlay that had a 115-foot height amendment in it that would have allowed the new building that the city's flagship 3 would be in to go up to 115 feet. We are working on a different version of that amendment that would instead have height by stories on that site that we think will end up working better on the site, and that will be coming back to you. It will be coming back to through Planning Commission and Council.
Okay. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Yes, sir.
Anthony G. Bryant, I actually came just for this public comment. I'm glad I made it. Anthony G. Bryant, 213 Cortland Avenue, Charleston, 29403, based upon Circuit Federal Magistrate across the street. That's where my address is at. A public comment was made to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding height restrictions years ago regarding the Ports Authority and its height restrictions as far as the terminal was concerned. The question simply is, when you talk about getting the density, a density analysis and height and lower densities in West Ashley, all these densities we're developing right now, home rule, in my opinion, under your leadership and further, is a bad idea. We really need to get state and counties together to develop a total new conceptualization of zoning and planning in South Carolina based on all the acts of God. Insurance Commission comment was made by me in 2013. Also, comment was made to the Army Corps of Engineers, which I'll put on the record, of West Ashley on a project over there. And also the comment was made to the EPA. All these have been put on the record at the court in terms of, my relationship with you. And also for the record, and we need to have public safety heavily involved in the zoning process to ensure the legal descriptions can be made properly by folks. We don't want to have mayors going around the country making appropriate legal descriptions of people and causing serious problems for a whole group of people. So we hope that you keep that in mind as you move forward in your mayorship as far as your legal descriptions of people. I want to make sure that's clear. But this issue is about the spot zoning in this area for West Ashley. This is all spot zoning. Also spot zoning. This is from the 1974, the 1984 spot zoning. That's all this is. And home rule is the premise of that bad idea. It's a premise of greed, principle of competition, which means greed. And that's what we do with greed right now. And so therefore, your approvals you've made since 1974 has led to serious greed. And this height restriction is about the Ports Authority and increasing their capacity to make money at the expense of poor people. That's the premise of height elevation for the terminal, which is out of the control of the city. So we hope that you take that into consideration as you move forward. I'm across the street right now. That's where my name is at, across the street. And I'll deal with that across the street. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, next we're going to approve some city council minutes.
February 26th.
Just the February 26 minutes. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any additions, deletions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We've approved the minutes. Next is our citizens' participation period. We have about, how many folks have signed up?
Jennifer, this is the only page? This is the only page we see.
The 22 of them? Yeah, okay. So about a minute and 15 seconds each, that'd be good. And so Madam Clerk will call out the names on the list, and if y'all would queue up to the microphone, please state your name and address before addressing council. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have Michael Turner, Sis Marshall, Alston Middleton, Chris Cody, and Greg Smith.
Minute and 15 seconds.
Minute 15.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Mike Turner. I'm at 28 Wagner Avenue. My wife Jean and I have lived there for about 15 years, and I'm speaking tonight to agenda item L2, short-term rentals. We were in Wagner Terrace, and we had about a year ago, suddenly in a house right next to us, it's only a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home that had been an elderly person living there, and wonderful, but she passed away, and then all of a sudden, for 2 months, we had short-term rentals, which we were taken aback by it, because one weekend we had 6 young men coming from Florida license plates on 3 trucks, 2 of which were parked in the grass of that place and 1 in the driveway, and they took their Uber downtown to King Street, had a great time all weekend, and then they were gone. The next weekend, we had a whole bunch of young ladies who were having a bridal party, and they were doing the same thing. I have to tell you that in our 15 years in Wagner Terrace has been wonderful. We have a family neighborhood that's really, really thriving. We have children on sidewalks, playing in yards, and we're worried that that is going to be imperiled by this short-term rental.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Chris? Oh, Sis is next, okay.
Okay, I'm not the last one this time. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank our two council members for standing up for Wagner Terrace and stating that we basically are not in favor of short-term rentals. And I would like to ask, since we have 1,500 illegal cases in this city already, why are we rushing? I agree with what comments were made. Why are we rushing? Why do we have to have a second reading? Because as I saw city council members looking at their agenda and what they were supposed to do tonight, some of them were saying, well, this has been changed, and I don't know where these changes came from. So I think that we all need to be on the same page, knowing what the end result is going to be, so that we in the neighborhoods can explain this to our people and to the people who put you in your position. Let's think about the people who pay the bills and pay the taxes, and forget about the contractors and the people who are wanting all their money right now. But think about the people who live in Charleston. They're getting very disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Austin Middleton.
Yes, ma'am. My name's Austin Middleton. I'm the current president of Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association. So I'm here to represent mainly myself, but I have to agree with my two peers here who were just talking. And the 1,500 cases, just why don't you enforce the current law right now? And you could make $1,087 per case and then not have to raise the parking meters. You know, so doesn't that make sense? I mean, come on, you know, this could potentially destroy the culture of our neighborhoods. So let's just slow down and work this in a phased approach. Go with class or class 1 or whatever. What are the terms for it? And then class 2, and then you can get to us at class 3 after, you know, you figure out what's wrong with the other things. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Chris Cody, Historic Charleston Foundation. I'm going to speak very quickly to you all about two very important issues that have come up during your deliberations about short-term rentals. The first is the absolute necessity to have an age requirement, a minimum age requirement for Class 2 and 3 for the purpose of preventing purpose-built new construction. On every single BAR small agenda, people are building units in their backyards, they're adding them onto their homes as additions, and the economics of this industry really do incentivize that. So the short-term rental task force recommended that there be an age requirement just for not to eliminate the ability of people on Daniel Island or West Ashley to do this, but just so that people don't buy houses to turn them into hotels. And we agree with the amendment offered by the Planning Commission to reduce that to 5 years. Secondly, and perhaps even more important, we very strongly ask you to maintain the requirement that properties must be individually listed in the Old and Historic District. This is the area of our city that is under the most intense market pressures for hospitality uses, and we studied every alternative in depth, both on the task force and back at Historic Charleston Foundation, every other classification under the National Register that we could have employed, and every other alternative would lead to an apocalyptic level of eligible properties in this incredibly intensely pressured area. We ask that you respect the unanimous vote of every neighborhood in this area. Every neighborhood voted for the individually listed requirement. The folks who you pay to study this, city staff, please maintain that requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hey, Greg.
My name is Greg Smith. I live at 314 Grove Street, which is in the Wagner Terrace neighborhood, and I speak too about our concern, my wife and I, regarding short-term rentals. The neighborhood we live in is a very quiet, family-oriented neighborhood, and our concern is that people start buying homes, which they are in our neighborhood now, it's a very popular place to move to for a family. If people start buying homes and turning them into a business, it's definitely going to change the character of that neighborhood. So I'm here to encourage the council, as you start to set up your regulations for this, to think about neighborhoods like Wagner Terrace and not change the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So now we have Jane, Temple, and Mary. Do you know the people from D. Norton? I think these are D. Norton. Did you know their names?
Beverly Hutchinson, that was her.
Okay,
correct.
and then Edna Shepherd. Is that D. Norton also?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we have Jane Temple, Suzanne Hardy, Frank Hardy, Chris King, and Karen Keys.
Thank you for your time. My name is Jan Temple. I live on Headquarters Island on Johns Island. And I want to talk about the results of all of our construction. Johns Island, as you know, is exploding. And when you face it, you finally feel it. And what I have discovered there from my neighbors that I've talked to, because I have property on Thunder Trail, 2861 Thunder Trail, is issues dealing with construction hours. They currently go from early morning until 11 o'clock at night. A plethora of other issues. And bottom line, in looking at that, we have a city ordinance, code 2116, that has no loud noise from 11 at night till 7 in the morning. Then we have 2552, which is public nuisance. But we really have left the building officials and the code people in a conundrum. And we've left the people that are the neighbors of the constructions in a conundrum, because there is no established allowable time for building construction activity. And something needs to be done about that. All of us have neighbors that are elderly, people with children going to school, babies, illnesses, and infants. And when they're there working all those hours, no one's getting any rest. And Charleston is getting a bad eye out of this. Charleston, the great state of Charleston that I know, needs to come together on this issue. I am formally requesting that we pull together the people from building codes and from livability, because the buck keeps getting passed. I've experienced this as I've been talking to my neighbors this week. This is just one of a number of topics, and we need to address this one. I didn't even get to 2. All right, thank you. Please, this is a serious issue. It's impacting your neighbors, your friends, and your health. And we need our lovely image back where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Suzanne Hardy, 32 Prelude Street. I want to call to council's attention that it's been 4 months since you voted unanimously to issue a new RFP for qualified auditing companies to bid on the audit for racial bias in the police department. Yet still the subcommittee has not met. Sadly, that delay sits on top of the almost 2 years since we originally asked for an audit to be done. In the meantime, nothing's changed for people of color. They continue to suffer frequent harassment and stops and fear at the hands of our police. Our city and citizens continue to be at risk of a severe incident like we see videoed across the country. So I ask you, what will it take for the subcommittee to meet, to confirm the scope of work, and get the RFP out there for bids? We, CAJM, Charleston Area Justice Ministry, have done the groundwork. We've created a detailed scope of work that's been accredited by experts in the field. We've modified the scope to assure it fits within the city's budget, and we've provided a list of at least 6 companies qualified to do this work. We urge you to move forward right now with no further delays. People's well-being and lives depend on your taking action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Frank Hardy, also of 32 Prelude Street. And I'm here to remind you that CAJM has invited you all, council and mayor, to please come to the, is it loud enough? To please come to our Nehemiah Action, which is on April 30th. We have voted this year to choose the issue of affordable housing as our main issue. And we've been researching that, and we are coming up with some good ideas. we would like you to come to the Nehemiah action so that you can hear about that. We know that it is also a big priority issue for you as well. We want to work together with you, cooperatively make important contributions to affordable housing. So we urge your attendance, April 30th, 7 p.m., Mount Moriah Baptist Church, North Charleston. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chris King.
Good evening, Christopher King with the Preservation Society. Since I was placed on the Tourism Task Force, we've seen another 1 million tourists roughly come to Charleston and thousands of houses lost to an accommodations use. But I'd really like to advocate tonight on behalf of the city staff. I would have liked for all of y'all to be in the year-long, more like year-and-a-half-long conversations that we had with city staff on the task force, and to hear the conversation and to hear what they told us, every department of the city, and hear more importantly what they asked for. This ordinance is what city staff has asked for. We need to give them the tools. We have the utmost confidence. You've heard from Jacob, you've heard from Dan, you've heard from Lee. We need to give them the tools to get going on this. The National Register criteria is critical, and we urge you to keep this. If not, we're afraid it might have to go back to the Planning Commission. We beg you not to do that. The parking is critical. We've got to get it right. We also are concerned that the provisions get weaker as we go up the peninsula. We agree that Hampton Park, Wagner Terrace, North Central, these neighborhoods are put at risk with what's in front of us. Keeping the homeowners is essential. Let's stop rehashing this. Let's give our city staff what they're asking for. Let's get to work. Let's try this out. I think Councilman Moody said it well. Let's get going, and we can always come back and revisit it. And we ask you to make the statement, let's stop eroding our neighborhoods and our housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Karen Keys. I live on Robert E. Lee Boulevard on James Island. I'm general manager of Turnkey Vacation Rentals here in Charleston. We're a national property management company, and I want to say I thank you for all your time and efforts and work to make a legal boundary for short-term rentals to operate in the city. However, I will say that whole home rentals in the 6% tax status are very important to include in this as rentals. My day, every day, is spent speaking to homeowners. You know, they rent a second property that maybe has been in their home for years and years to help pay their bills, to help keep that home within their family, to help offer accommodations for guests and tourists coming to this city that can't find appropriate accommodations with hotel lodging. That might be for budget reasons or their family situation or a need to be at MUSC for, a sick child for an undetermined amount of time. There's incredible reasons why these homes are very important to the accommodation stock here, and managing them responsibly with guest screening and noise monitoring and so many other security features that can be put in place can make them very responsible rentals within the city. So I thank you for considering that, and I hope, as I heard this afternoon, and you had so many questions still on the table, I hope you'll reconsider and look at this a little closer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could be Linda something, whoever your address starts 65. All right, and then Yvonne Fortenberry, Kevin High, and this could be Phyllis, something Fort Ashland.
Hi, Linda Lloyd. One thing I'd like to say is since 2:30 I've learned an important civic lesson. One is that you people who are sitting here definitely were elected. And then I think that you appointed someone to the task force. And then it went to Planning Commission. And at the Planning Commission, Mayor Tecklenburg kind of implored that the commission send something to council to act on. And the vote was 4-4. And then to get it to you guys, it was, and ladies, it was someone changed their vote to 5-3. So that's where we are right now and how we got here. I agree with the people who say let's slow the horse down and consider what there is to be considered here. Doing my homework in Class 1, which is a class that would be important to me, there are only 47 homes eligible to apply for short-term rental as the National Register of Historic Places is a requirement. And I'm just going to bypass every other thing that I had written here because that's important. In Class 1, only 47 homes or properties are eligible to apply if this ordinance passes as it's written. As a property owner in that area, I feel discriminated within the class and across the classes in Class 2 and Class 3. They do not have that requirement. I think you should look at this closely to give everybody a fair shot to be a responsible citizen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Yvonne Fortenberry, 85 Smith Street. I'm also representing the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to thank you for your time on this issue and the city staffs and the city task force who have spent so much time and work on this. We have been waiting now 2 years for some action on this. This started back in May 2016. So it's critical that City Council go ahead and act. The task force came up with some great recommendations. It's a great balance, and it protects our neighborhoods. We encourage the adoption of those task force recommendations, particularly the whole house prohibition, the parking restrictions, and the National Register restriction. That is critical for the Class 1 area to prevent the overproliferation, which we already have in the neighborhoods. I would also ask that during this transition period, once the ordinance is passed, that staff go ahead and start some of the enforcement. I've been waiting 2 years to have some of the properties next to me enforced, so hopefully you won't wait another summer for that.
Thank you.
Kevin Hahn.
Thank you. I'll be as quick as I can. I expected 2 minutes. Maybe the mayor will give me a few more seconds. My name is Kevin High. I'm the owner of Walkway Stays. I've been operating legal short-term rentals in Charleston for about 12 years. First of all, I want to applaud Councilman Lewis and Mitchell for voting against something that none of you had read and completely disregarded the zoning board's recommendations. With the exception of knowing the address, the short-term rentals, everything in this ordinance is unenforceable and unfair. You are forcing the city to be a micromanager and a babysitter. 2 unenforceable rules are to say the owner must be on premise at all times. This is ridiculous, impossible, and overbearing. To say you can only have 4 guests in a 10-bedroom house, but can cram 4 people into a studio apartment is unenforceable, unfair in every way. It means a family of 5 like myself can only stay in a hotel with 2 or 3 rooms. I need 4 parking places. When we flew in and took Uber, I'm not even using a car. This ordinance will be a complete disaster and opens the doors to purpose-built short-term apartments on every lot downtown with a house that meets the guideline. Remember that, the guideline. It will destroy every neighborhood in Charleston, especially Wagner Terrace and Ansonboro. If you have all the tools now and don't change anything with the existing relationship, with the existing regulations, you can enforce it, the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods will be protected. This proposal is an experiment with no proof of success and guaranteed failure. Again, this proposal is an experiment with no proof of success. The highly successful enforceable Cannon-Borough short-term rental bed and breakfast laws extend the city and is working perfectly good. Just extend that. There's more I need to say. Unfortunately, I can't speak.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Phyllis Ewing, and I'm here to represent the Charlestown Neighborhood Association. First of all, I would like to remind everybody, if you have a rental and you can't do it short-term, it doesn't mean you can't have a long-term rental. It's not one thing or nothing. But mostly, I want to say our neighborhood supports the task force proposed ordinance that the city is proposing. We think it's good because it emphasizes the 4% homeowner status to have one. The parking requirements are good, and we feel that this ordinance is enforceable because there's so many different checks that have to be checked off, and that it will let people know what's going on, and it also will allow the city to collect revenue from these things which have been going illegally. And we're always like that, don't we? Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Willis John Dix. I guess this is Marcy Brockbank. Sean Lawson. Ginger Lace. Mayor.
I'm Ann Hester Willis. I live at 28 Charlotte Street, and I was on the task force. I want to say a few things. One, being individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places was originally suggested to the task force by the city staff. And we took the city staff suggestions and put them in our recommendations because the city was telling us that's how they can enforce the short-term rental ordinance. I also want to say that during this, I've heard several people say that during this process, all sides have not been represented. The task force took about a year and a half to go through this process. We had 4 or 5 listening sessions. At every one of our meetings, people were given the opportunity to speak, and we heard from VRBO, we heard from Airbnb, we heard from the people in this city that want to do short-term rentals, and people in the city that are doing them illegally. So I feel like the task force spent quite a long time hearing repeatedly from all across the board, people that felt, had lots of different opinions, and we took all those opinions into consideration, but we still reached a conclusion about the ordinance that we thought was enforceable, that would help the city enforce and protect our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Josh Dix with the Charleston Trident Association of Realtors. Just want to say it's been a fairly constructive day. I want to thank y'all for taking the time and coming and discussing this issue. The planning department, the task force, and all the thoughts and ideas that have gone into this. I would like to encourage y'all to continue to move forward with this process. We need to create a system that is fair and equitable for our homeowners, but also creates a level of responsibility for homeowners in the city district. We do find the age requirements citywide to be a bit arbitrary, as not all things are equal on and off the peninsula. I hope that between second and third reading, we could have a little bit more of a delay so we can discuss this issue in more depth. But I feel like this is a good step forward as we look to create a better solution for a bad situation here in town. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Mara Brockbank, Rutledge Avenue in Charleston Village. This is taken from South Carolina Biz News, and I've forgotten my glasses. South Carolina gained $7.6 million in tax revenue from Airbnb in 2017. To date, Airbnb has remitted $9.6 million revenue to the state since it began collecting in June of 2016. The company collects and remits hotel occupancy and tourist revenues on behalf of the host. 431,000 travelers used Airbnb to visit the Palmetto State. The money will be used for education, infrastructure, and health resources. South Carolina earns about $69 million. Great, thank you. Sorry. Oh, that's much better. There are approximately 6,600 families in South Carolina that are hosting Airbnb guests. The average Airbnb host is a middle-income family that uses the Airbnb to bring in extra revenue for their family, and also the guests are middle-income families. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sean Lawson. Ginger Blaze.
Hi, Ginger Schofield, 9 Laurel Avenue. I'm just reaching out to you today to encourage you to defer. At least allow the people who continuously show up to these meetings, this is for short-term rentals, to continuously show up to these meetings. We're obviously responsible homeowners that don't have any issues with their neighbors. If you take your time and pass this regulations you can enforce, we can get rid of bad actors. I'm newly married. If we have a family, I want to be home while the kids are young. In the past, I rented out my home and left the property while tenants were present. When that took off, I decided to buy a second property, and these properties will be my source of income while I stay at home. If you pass this proposed ordinance today, I won't be able to do that. I don't like doing long-term rentals. I have a house full of furniture. What am I going to do with that? It's not just one or the other. If a homeowner feels more comfortable.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ashley, Jenny. Okay. And Matthew.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ashley Hajini. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for HomeAway VRBO. I'd like to start by thanking Council. I know this is a very difficult, emotional issue. It's very complicated, as you know by now, and thank you to staff for all their hard work. I want to leave you guys with just a couple of things. To some comments that were made earlier during the work session, this is a ban. Traditional vacation rentals are not shared homes. They're not 4% homes. They're 6% homes. And I think anybody who's ever stayed in a short-term rental while traveling could answer that question pretty easily. The idea that somebody is going to take their home if they're not allowed to short-term rent and magically turn it into a long-term rental or sell it is not only unfair, it's very unrealistic. People that own second homes, especially in this area, it's usually a home that they've inherited that they're trying to keep. They like to use it for part of the year. Long-term rental is not a solution for them. Through our own internal surveys, we found that people will more often than not just let those homes sit empty. And that might be good for a certain contingent in Charleston, but it's not good for Charleston overall. And you guys are missing out on a huge opportunity to not only leverage that revenue, but capture the information that you need to effectively regulate. The way that this ordinance is drafted, primary only, has not been able to be enforced in any city that I have knowledge of. So just want to leave you guys with that. I'm happy to serve as a resource and answer your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Noah Everett, Susan Bass, Jay Williams, and Peggy Steele.
Hi, Matt Doskotch, 36 Moultrie Street. The parking issue is really what's going to kill most of us. And by most of us, I mean the 4% homeowners who live at home and just want to rent out rooms. The people that you all profess and are supposed to be encouraging to be able to make money at this, the ones who are allowed. But in my neighborhood, there's not a single house. I've walked block to block to block up in the Upper Peninsula. Not a single house that has any off-street parking. So essentially, what's really unfair about this and kind of doesn't really make any sense, isn't based on any logic, reason, or anything like that, is that every house in Charleston, single-family homes for parking, are allowed to have up to 4 people on a lease with the existing parking that exists, without the need for any additional parking. But yet with short-term rentals, you're saying in class 3 that we can only have 1 free space. Really, we should have 3 free spaces. If it's me living on the property, and then I can rent 3 other rooms to long-term renters with cars, who always come with cars. Then with short-term rentals, I should absolutely be able to rent out 3 rooms free without any additional parking. This is going to kill all of us. It's going to kill all of us. In Class 1, the historic registry, which is completely, it's not apocalyptic. I'm sorry, Chris. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, for your time. Just to cut to the chase, I'm on the French Quarter Neighborhood Association Board of Directors. I'm also a homeowner and full-time resident of the French Quarter. Thank you, Mr. White. To cut to the chase, we ask that you support the original task force recommendation for Class 1 being on the National Register of Historic Places individually, the parking requirements, and banning whole home rentals. I have a unique perspective. I live next door, I live 2 blocks that way, to a whole home rental for about a year. And in that time, we had to call the police out 4 times. We had people crawling on our roof to drink and smoke cigarettes. We actually caught one of the female guests urinating in front of our door. We caught that on our security camera, and we caught that actually in person. That was with me and my wife. So it became a gamble of, are we going to be able to get sleep tonight, or are we going to have to call the cops and stay up and fill out the reports and stuff like that. So that's not a case of what could happen. This is actually what we experienced right here in the French Quarter when we lived next to one for a year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Jay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
City Councilman, I'm Jay Williams. I live at 81 King Street. I find it kind of interesting that I'm hearing people from HomeAway, companies from not only out of state, but in some cases out of the country, trying to plunder Charleston, South Carolina, to destroy affordable housing by turning houses into short-term rentals. I find it also interesting that I, as a homeowner, have to defend residential zoning against businesses opening up next door to me. Is that right? I don't think I should have to defend zoning for the city. I think the city should defend the zoning for us. I think it would be better if you applied the short-term rental recommendations, the task force recommendations. They spent a long time figuring them out. And then if you want to loosen them up, you can. But if you let the toothpaste out of the tube too early, you'll never get it back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, City Council, I'm Susan Bass. I live at 18 State Street. I'm also the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. And I would like to thank the task force for their very hard work over a long period of time and urge City Council members to pass the ordinance as they recommended. We in the French Quarter are facing approximately, don't hold me to the exact number, 611 new hotel rooms coming in to our neighborhood. I don't need the rest of the neighborhood to turn into hotel rooms. People have to remember they can still rent, but we need to have some protection with our homes. We are tax-paying citizens, and we would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Peggy Malaspina. I live at 20 State Street, and I am also on the French Quarter Neighborhood Association Board, and I was a member of the task force. I urge you to support the ordinance that the task force came up with. At the last meeting of the Planning Commission that made some adjustments to that ordinance, a young man spoke in front of the group, and he sort of looked at most of us who were a lot older than he was with disdain and said, "This is the wave of the future. Do not let this opportunity pass you by. Someday you are going to turn around and look at this time and say, I can't even believe that we were talking about this or debating this." Well, I have a different view. He was entitled to his, but I believe that this is the time where we draw a line and we say, we need to defend our neighborhoods. We need to be able to protect the homeowners who bought their homes to live in them, but also provide some flexibility and ability to have short-term rentals. I believe that the ordinance does that, and it protects all the right things. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your comments and participation here
Mayor,
this evening.
just really quickly, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just
Councilmember Sinky.
before it gets away from us, I made a note about this. The young lady who came up and spoke to us about hours of construction, can we put that on an agenda somewhere in the near future to talk about? Because she is so right. And it's something we need to address, and it is a big black hole in our zoning ordinance. We've got nothing out there. And I'm going to handle this.
Thank you.
So if we could just get this on an agenda to talk about it, and I saw Dan Riccio here, so thank you.
No problem.
And Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. The vote, if I'm not mistaken, on this was 10-1, because I abstained. It was not 11-3. Yes. I'm just saying, people are saying the vote was 11.
Oh, no.
Right.
We clarified what the vote was.
Right, but I'm just saying, folks are still thinking that it's, right. They
Okay.
voted against it, I abstained.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so if we could move forward then, we have under petitions and communications a number of commission appointments. We have, is that to include AI through 6? Okay. Okay, any comments, suggestions? Councilmember Moody.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I
sir.
noticed in looking at, I think it had to do with the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I'm not sure exactly, this was just handed to us tonight.
Kind of a worksheet, yes, sir.
Yeah, and I was curious, the large bar and the small bar have some pretty big holes. And the large bar has 4 vacancies and the small bar has 4 vacancies?
I don't think that's correct. No, sir, that's not. I'm sure it's not. Huh.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to that.
Yes, sir.
That's a clerical error. That's not correct. That's a clerical error.
Yeah.
The boards are, the BAR, small and large, are both staffed. So
Yeah.
that's a clerical error.
This is just a worksheet that our staff has been using. I guess we thought we'd share it with you, but we'll...
Well, I just started looking at this, and that happened to be on the first page, and then I kind of got a little bit concerned about what was going on with all that.
Yeah.
But I would ask, like the small bar, we got one member, Jay Claypool, who's a lawyer, that has to be replaced, not replaced, but he has to be reappointed.
Reappointed, yes, sir.
And I think he's on here as the only one. But sometimes we don't get who has applied, whether or not, we just get one person, one name. We don't know who has maybe applied, who we're rejecting.
I think that's the purpose of the worksheet here, is if you'll say flip down to the
Application.
to the 3rd page, and you see some people where it says application, application, application. That means that these are folks who have applied for a position.
So, all right, so we're going to, I went to the page 3 there, the BZA zoning. I think we've got one of those available, BZA zoning, it's item number 5.
Right.
And I think we had, if I look at it right quick, I can probably tell you. I guess it's on the previous page. There was 3 members, I think. There were 3 members that are being reappointed. Are we going to vote on each one of those, or are we going to be able to, is this your recommendation, or is this, what about these other applicants down here? What's the status of those?
Well, what's presented to you on the individual sheets is our recommendation, okay? And this composite worksheet did include people who had applied through our boards and commissions website. Does that answer your question?
I guess maybe it does, and I've got a little bit of a problem with that, because what I saw was that everybody that applied was pretty much rejected, and everybody that was already on the board was approved for reappointment, and I think that sends a message to our citizens, don't apply. If all of them are like that, then that's what I saw.
Right. Well, I would just respond and say that, a lot of the terms that we're dealing with now were just set as 1-year terms, and so many of those individuals did want to continue to serve, and as far as I know, we asked them all if they were willing and wanted to continue to serve, and they had a shorter term because we had started staggering the appointments. So I would hope that that won't be the message taken.
That might be it,
Yeah.
because what we've got then is maybe some other people that we need to look at, and maybe as we get on over here, I just looked at the first few pages when I got it,
Right,
and I didn't know, because I know we talked about staggering those terms
right.
by everybody, but everybody was just being reappointed, and nobody that had applied had been selected. So I just got a little bit...
And there are some, it wasn't everybody, like, well, some of our council members needed to be reappointed, but,
well, council members don't count.
Well, apparently they do.
you know, I think we had a new appointment on the, we had a new appointment on, the disability issues appointment. We had 3 new appointments on the disabilities, commission. We had, a new appointment, I don't know if it's in this batch, on the tourism. So anyway, that's.
I guess my point is that I felt like there wasn't really a whole lot of choice here. I'm not sure what I'm voting on.
Right.
But, you know.
I hear you,
Yeah.
but that's the way it played out. Councilmember Waring, then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, do we have a motion on the floor? Okay.
We do.
So do it,
I have Councilman Lewis, I don't have a second, he was the second. I'll second. Okay.
just, I mean, doing the
voting on
discussion, to approve it.
Approve what? This?
No, to approve.
New
It was the
appointment.
appointment of boards and commissions,
Yeah.
it's broad.
So it's all of this.
It's not all of this. This is a worksheet. What we will vote on is in your, you know, your packet there. There's one individual letter or memo for each one of the appointments that are listed. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 memos.
I'm going to ask respectfully for deferral, mainly because we just getting this. It'd be good if we can kind of look over this a couple of weeks and respond back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, I pointed this out before. My name is spelled 2 or 3 different ways. The AKA, right. Would someone just make sure that my name is spelled correctly throughout?
I'll do my very best, Councilmember Gregory.
I mean, Gregory with a Y, Dudley Gregory, William Gregory with an I-E.
I do have.
I want history to be able to tell, you know.
You know.
Right.
Ms. Griffith.
And then there was one other question, Mayor, on the Arts Commission. As you know, I'm on that commission, but I'm not on this sheet as being on that commission. The one you're on?
Arts, well, it's actually William George.
On that, oh, that's why I missed it.
I just thought that was Bob.
I thought so.
He's on, that's the case, he's good until July this next year.
That's 4 different ways, man.
Okay, we had a motion to defer.
Please.
Did we get a second on that?
Second.
Okay.
Who made the motion to defer?
Councilmember Waring.
And Councilmember Shea.
Shade made the second, or Griffin. Did you want to be heard?
Well,
Mr.
I
Griffin?
just wanted to say that I'm pretty sure, I mean, I might not be right here, but I'm pretty sure that most of the time when somebody's term's about to expire, whoever's in charge of that commission usually goes to that person, asks if they want to be reappointed.
That's correct.
And when they don't want to be, then they reach out and look at who the applicant pool is. And a lot of times it's if one of us makes a recommendation. I know I recommended somebody for the Recreation Commission, somebody who has 30 years of middle school football coaching experience and that sort of thing, and he applied, so I went and asked. But what I'm getting at here is that, I know I'm kind of rambling on. Usually, if somebody doesn't want to be reappointed, then that's when they go out and look for somebody. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong.
For the most part. It doesn't have to happen that way, but that's, if you have a citizen who's active on the board, and like I'll ask my staff if someone hadn't been attending the meetings, you know, even if they say they'd like to continue to serve, if they hadn't made a meeting, I mean, you got to think about that, right? Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to ask Mr. Waring, why did you ask for deferral time?
Well, even when we looked at the applicants, I'm just getting this, so I didn't have a chance to really go through it. I kind of feel like I'm doing my homework at the meeting, and most of the time we do our homework between meetings. So that's why I'm asking.
So isn't our job to accept the appointments of the mayor, to ask the mayor, I mean, if we have any questions about the actual person?
If we have a difference, we get to discuss it with the mayor. Sometimes it makes a change, sometimes it doesn't. But we have input.
Maybe the topic should be that we got a draft of the appointments in the future so that I think this is an awkward time to be challenging the reappointments that the mayor put in front of us. I do think that it's a function of the rolling date, that most of these appointments, because they were just issued sometime during the year last year, they haven't even really filled the full, first year, so I think that's why we have such a long list.
Well, let me respond to that.
It happened with the Women's Commission.
Let me respond to that. How much time have you had to deliberate these appointments?
I know that we received a list at the end of the year.
I just got these. We just got these lists put on our desk today.
I know, but we got a different one from Mr. Giroux, as I recall, that gave us the exact same committees with the people who had applied and when the positions themselves, the seats themselves were going to be up.
I understand, but I like more time.
So what went out in your, if I may respond, and thank you for raising the question, I certainly find for y'all to take as much time as you need to deliberate. So we had included in your packet the 6 memos that outline who was being reappointed. Mostly these are folks that served 1-year terms because we were trying to stagger the terms, and they were all willing to serve. So this was the worksheet that was also included, and you had not seen this, and it's got other listings of people who had applied for not only these, but other committees that are out there, in the works. So I urge you to take your time and look at it.
And that's one reason, Mr. Mayor, there are also other committees here that also have applicants and appointments that I thought I'd like more time to consider.
And you will find some mistakes in here, and just report them back to us, and
I did once, Mayor, that didn't do any good.
Sir?
Nothing.
Councilmember Seeking.
Just a practical question, if Mr. Lindsay. I do note that one of the appointments are 3 members to the BZA zoning, and there are 3 expired terms, so if we defer this, are we going to sort of decapitate the BZA until, well, I think technically their terms end on the 28th of February.
The BZA does need to move forward.
That's, well, I just want to make sure everyone, we know what we're doing. If we defer this, we're going to be 3 short.
Not even on hand to do.
And these are all reappointments. There are 3 reappointments to the BZA.
So the terms, as the mayor said, have been staggered in order to create this continuity among the boards, and that's been a very good thing for us, just across the board. On the Board of Zoning Appeals, we do have a time frame around those appointments, and should a board member serve beyond a term? That's not a question that I can answer. But fundamentally, we need our board members there to do their job.
Are you saying they're going to be booted off if we wait 2 weeks and come back with appointments?
I can't answer that. I have to defer.
Okay, I mean,
Here's a lawyer.
Anybody who serves beyond their term
Holdover.
holds over. And
Right, thank you, Council.
Yeah. They hold over. Okay, we have a motion to defer. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our Committee on Public Safety, Councilmember Shade.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the Public Safety met on Wednesday, March 21st. We went into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. No action was taken.
All right. Next would be our Committee on Community Development. Councilmember Mitchell. He's out of the room. He'll be back. Okay, we'll come back to that. Committee on Public Works, Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The items on the agenda, as you see it, were approved. We also, and I move for those approvals. Also, we had a discussion on Church Creek Basin, which is a standing item now on the agenda, as well as the update on the buyouts. Also on the agenda is a standing item now of the Hugie and King Street Drainage Project, because it is a project that we have funding for. So at the next meeting, he couldn't come at this meeting, but Mr. Frank Newham will be there to explain the Davis and Floyd recommendations, which was 38 years ago, 36 years ago, and what it's going to take to ramp it up. I think when we have projects that we have funding for, drainage projects that we have funding for, we have to find a way to accelerate those projects. I think we can all hopefully agree to that. So often we've got drainage projects that we don't have money for. So in this case, we do.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Lewis.
I certainly want to thank the committee for looking at the Hugie Street project, because I keep telling this council for years, Hugie Street is one of the worst public safety issue in this city. You come off the September Clark Expressway, go up Ashley Avenue, you can't go nowhere. You turn down Sumter Street to King, you go to King and Hugie, it floods. You turn around and come to King to Line, it floods. People are boxed in. This project has been sitting on the board for years. We need to get it done. We need to get it done. We need to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's why we had it on the agenda as a standing item, because we finally have money for it, Councilman. So I'm moving for approval, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we got a motion to
And I will
approve.
vote on everything on it except West Edge.
Can we make that a standing objection?
I have my rights, brother.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
Councilmember Lewis is a no.
Okay.
No for West Edge, the only one.
No on 3A. Okay. So if I may, but the motion passes and the approval passes back to Committee on Community Development. Councilmember Mitchell.
Committee on Community Development met on Thursday at 4:30 p.m., but everything on there, both items was only for information only, so nothing no motion was taken on nothing, so it's information only. But we'll be coming back shortly, hopefully in the near future, pertaining to anything that you see on the committee, on the agenda.
All right, so that was for information only.
Information only.
I would like to share that.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes, sir.
And I'm still asking and all council members to please visit one of the Housing Authority meetings pertaining to the RAD program, so you can be aware of it, with the changes that's going to be taking place with the various housing authorities, and that's going to be nationwide. But you need to be familiarized with what's going on with that, so if people come up to you, you'll know exactly what's happening. I have attended all the meetings, and I think, Councilman Murray, you missed it, but I had them at the Community Development meeting, but I attended the Housing Authority, one of the Housing Authority meetings already.
I will echo that. I urge all council members to attend at least one of those meetings so everybody's aware of this proposed change in structure, really. Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will be getting to that meeting. I did get my package of the information that was provided to the community development members, and I'm wondering if that information can be sent out to all council members as just opposed to community development members, because it is a change that I think we all need to ramp up on.
Absolutely.
Get
Yes,
some
sir.
copies. We can do that and try to get it out to all the information.
Okay.
Yes, I echo that
Thank you.
because of Mr. Waring. I thought it was a very good presentation that spelled out the nuts and bolts of the rental development. I don't remember seeing the schedule. I got it early on, so would you be able to send it out, another schedule for the rest of the meetings?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So no vote was required on that. Thank you for sharing that information. Next, our Committee on Ways and Means, Councilmember White.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So our two bills up for third reading are still deferred, and now our first bill under second reading has been deferred. Correct?
Mayor.
So,
Mayor.
Councilmember Seeking.
Very briefly, because this attaches back to a bill that was up for public hearing, which was the zoning and the annexation, and you brought up something during that conversation, which I think is important just to take a pause and think about. The property that we're talking about right now is in an area that's very sensitive to our city with 3 council members looking at it that is currently not in the city. It's in the county. So you've got a zoning issue and you've got sort of a jurisdictional issue too. And as we think about going forward, if we want these property owners to come into the city, and you made a mention that we need to rethink our zoning schemes out there, as we do that, we've got to, I think, if we're protecting the edge along that drainage basin, we have to make sure the zoning fits up with the needs somewhat of the person who's coming in, because if not, they're just not going to annex in. And the truth of the matter is, with all due respect to our brethren and sisterin at the county, they're not paying as close attention to this as we are. So I just think it's something that we need to really think closely about. It's not just a zoning issue, it's a governmental ownership issue as well. And as the two come together, you can be as restrictive as you want on that zoning from the city side, but then they're not going to annex in. So we got to think about that and make sure it all fits.
I agree, and particularly if we want development to comply with our own drainage requirements, they got to be in the city, you know, or...
But if we zone it into something that's not attractive to the person who's ultimately going to go and develop it, they're not going to annex in, so then we've got ourselves really a worse problem. So
that's right.
That's correct, but with no control, no say. So I just think you brought it up, and I just want to make sure when Mr. Walker's here, I know his client's anxious. We all want to make sure we keep an eye on what's going on out there, not just in terms of density, but in terms of drainage and flooding.
Right.
It's complicated, but right now, we've got no say over that property, none, as this has been deferred.
So. That's a point well taken. Councilmember Waring.
Just to follow up on that, if this property hypothetically were developed in the county, we've had our moratorium, what kind of communication or coordination do we have with the county if this property were developed in the county so the drainage would not flow into the Church Creek Basin and would go towards Rantos? Have we had any kind of conversation with our engineering department regarding Church Creek drainage and the county, future development in the county flowing into the Church Creek drainage basin? Have we had any conversations? Does anybody know?
Not that I'm aware of, and Public Service isn't represented here tonight. I apologize.
That's okay. We can look into that, I would hope.
You know, if I may respectfully suggest, again, at our next Public Service Committee, that we raise that issue of just what coordination is going on with county regarding drainage. I mean, it's very good where we put our mind to it, like the doo-wop basin study. The county and the city are doing that jointly, and but in these more isolated annexations, I'm not sure that that's happening.
Same thing on James Island there. They're coordinating with the county.
Yes, they are coordinating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So,
just as a quick follow-up, when you've got these multi-jurisdictional issues, and James Island is a perfect example, when we put a moratorium on James Island, the county refused to follow suit, as you recall, so it sort of became checkerboard. So the whole multi-jurisdictional thing, I know we're working on it with the drainage and the zoning, but it's something we need to get out ahead of.
Right. Okay. Councilmember Wagner.
Yeah, just for information, directly across the street from Beach Ferry Road, there's a little thing called Bear Swamp, and it goes, I mean, it's 300-400 yards away. And once it hits Bear Swamp, it has no choice but to go to Rantos, if they take it that way. Or they could take it the other direction, the length between Beach Ferry and Savannah Highway, and run it right on into the Stono. But they have to go underneath Highway 17. And it seems to me like there's only one logical potential choice that they can make. That's to go to Rantos. Shortest distance between 2 points.
It would make sense.
Just a thought.
It would make sense. I can't say that everything I've encountered in city government makes sense. All right. So if we could move forward then to L2, which is in fact, excuse me?
2 through 6.
Well, they're not going to do it. I think it's separate.
Oh, we're not there yet. We're going to take up number 2 first.
Oh, you're going to do it separately?
I believe we need to, because number 2 is a short-term rental matter, and I believe we're going to...
So moved.
Unless y'all are ready to pass it right now.
Vote. Vote to defer.
Let's take number L2. What did I hear?
I moved for adoption.
Without changes?
Did I, Councilmember Mitchell, did I hear a motion from you first?
I make a motion to defer it.
He has a motion to defer. He did speak first. And
But that's okay. He's going to take precedent anyway, but I did speak first.
No, you
is there a second to?
I'll second his motion.
We've got a second to defer. Any discussion on the motion to defer?
Yeah, Mayor, just a little discussion. And why I probably will support deferring this, as I voted the last time I did abstain. It's kind of tough for me to vote on a document as amendment while we've discussed the amendments. They're not before me.
They're not what?
They're not before me. The amendments that we're going to make are not before me to vote on. It's kind of tough for me to do that, and that's the reason why I abstained the last time, because I really didn't know what I was voting on.
Right.
Okay? And that's why we'll probably either support the deferral or abstain again, because I know the list you gave, 5 items that we're going to put in here, but they're not here yet.
Well, no, and they may not get there. From the discussion, it seemed like those are things that council was interested in discussing, making amendments to the matter. But what we sent you in your package is what is before you now. And, we've had a month since our last meeting that we took this up. I would respectfully submit to you that Councilmember Moody's suggestion was a good one, that if we can get to a consensus tonight to just do a second reading, and that will, give us one more bite at the apple for anything that we want to clean up, which can be amended upon a third reading of the ordinance. So, Councilmember Griffin?
One thing that I heard tonight that concerned me about moving forward with this, I wouldn't necessarily mind having a second reading, moving forward to a third. But one reason why I'm leaning more toward deferral is the fact that we still have 3 officers that have not been hired for this. And for us to put a plan into motion when we haven't even filled the positions, they're going to be behind the 8 ball when the training period. I'd like to have them hired before that we move forward on this so that they can start the training period.
Well, respectfully, as Mr. Lindsay mentioned, for us to get our permitting done will take a little time. I mean, we're going to, what the proposal does, contrary to what many folks complaining we're not going to allow short-term rentals, we're actually going to make it legal for some folks to be able to do it, some homeowners to be able to do it. Right now, basically everybody outside of Canberra, Elliottboro is illegal. So it'll take us just a little time, a little transition period to get that permitting process, and people will come forward and apply for their permits. So we'll have the 3 folks on board by the time we're ready to start enforcement, I would say respectfully. Councilmember Moody, and then Lewis.
Yeah, I would prefer myself that we take the items, and I didn't write down all the items. I know I've got my own list here. I would like to take that 50-year out of at least the third class 3 and maybe class 2 and 3. I would like to put a stipulation in that this thing come up for review in 6 months. I think the elimination of the 10-year rule on the parking where we don't even have a lease, I mean, that's kind of silly to have something like that in it. And there were several others, if you would read yours, that I would propose that we amend the presented to it, at least put that in the document, whether we give it second reading or whether we defer it, at least so we come back, we've got something that we think we can maybe agree on. I mean, rather than having the wording and having everything, it gives us a couple weeks or so to kind of look at that, read it again, and be sure that we're. So that would be the items that I would request that we put in, and we amend the motion or the agreement that was presented And if you'll add your couple, 3 items to it, then we can determine whether or not we want those, and let's vote on those. Get the wording out to us and let us see what we got.
So I think parliamentarially wise, we need to vote on the motion to defer first. Otherwise,
I moved, but then he moved to defer.
I heard him speak first, Councilmember Seekings.
All right, okay.
Councilmember Lewis.
My reason is for deferring it because of the same information that you were stating. I'm not going to vote on something given no second or no reading until I know exactly what I'm voting on and have in front of me. I want to make sure all those things in there. So even I might give a second and third reading at the same time. Doesn't matter. But I'm not going to just piece. We've been doing this for a long time. And I said, even with the short-term task force, I brought that to council because it wasn't going to come out. I brought it to council because I had people coming by my house ringing my bell and asking me what I'm going to do. And Councilman Lewis will tell you, every day coming ringing my bell, bing bong. I think the young man is still here. I don't know if he's still here or not. But this is what it was. So I said, well, what I'm going to do, let's act on it. Let me bring it to city council. And I brought it here on city council. And that's how this thing got started. Because otherwise, we'd have still been kicking it around. And the task short-term ban wouldn't even become forward if we didn't bring it to council because the council member had to bring it here.
Councilmember Lewis.
I can't see how we can vote on something also that we don't have the system in place to track it, to enforce the law. You know, I was told at the last meeting that the laws that were on the book were unenforceable. Then I heard tonight that they've take 77, about 87 people to court. Well, something's wrong. They told me something at one meeting, then in a workshop tonight, I hear something else. I like to see the system in place, the people that we hire and enforce it in place.
Right.
Then maybe my mindset will be totally different. But right now, I can't support it.
Oh, I understand. Let me just respectfully say, I think we all agree what we have now is very difficult to enforce, okay? And so what we're trying to do is put something in place that is a heck of a lot easier to enforce. And so you can't enforce it until you put it in place.
The whole entire city, you still could put the enforcement piece of there until we do the amendments to the ordinance that you got here. Let's start enforcing what we got on the book. You know how much people you got out there doing it illegal right now? You don't know. You don't know.
Right.
Don't have nothing to track it. But if you go tomorrow and arrest somebody, you can't arrest them because there's no way to say they're violating a city ordinance. But if you put the enforcement piece in place now, you can start going after those who are doing illegal right now.
I feel that's what we're trying to do. Councilmember Ware.
No, we're trying to just legalize it over the whole city, but we still don't have that in place. Plus, we don't have the enforcement officers in place, so we still don't have nothing. We'll just to be voting. But
thank you, sir. Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pick up on what several council members have said. I think your suggestions and the suggestions around the table was a great tweaking of it, but we really do need to see it in writing in front of us for us to consider. So I think 2 weeks wouldn't be too long. So I'm going to support the deferral. I really appreciate what the task force has done. I don't want these people to think that we don't appreciate what they've done. But they did have the benefit of a year and a half. We've had basically a month that has been in front of us. And for some of the tweaking that we've done right here on the floor, to wait for it to be deliberated and over the next 2 weeks so we can read it to make sure that's what was said or that wasn't what was said, would make sense for us to vote on something going forward. I kind of feel like people in Congress right now that voted on a 2,000-page tax bill. You know, they didn't know what was in it. So anyway, I'm gonna vote for the deferral so we can look over the suggestions that you made and some of us made, that we can see it recorded appropriately in front of us.
Well, I would just respectfully say that I think we ought to dig into those 5 or 6 items that I outlined, and we can't dig into them. It won't be on the floor if we defer it. So I wouldn't have anything different to bring you next time.
Oh no, we can work on that. If we defer it, that would be the instructions to work on those 4 or 5 things that we spoke about.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
Baron, I mean, I agree that, well, I don't know if I agree that we should defer it, but I do agree that we've got 5 or 6 things that we each mentioned were potential stumbling blocks for us to pass the ordinance as it's now presented to us. And we won't know what we're seeing in 2 weeks if we don't go through each of those items now, because we're not in lockstep. I mean, I don't detect that too many of you are in favor of removing the National Register criteria. So you wouldn't want to see that in an ordinance until we've talked through it tonight to decide if that's something that you want to see in an amended version, right? And something else about the maneuverability of the parking. So I think there are several issues that we've touched on, but we don't have a majority agreement to instruct the staff to go back and make any amendments.
But during that 2-week period, we get to have those discussions back. We don't have to work everything out on the floor tonight.
Councilmember Wagner, then White, then Moody.
I'm trying to take back to my history, back to our rules of council, and I'm remembering somewhere if we vote second reading, then there can be no discussion at third reading. I believe that's what our rules of council have said.
Point of order, that's what I was going to suggest. If we could withdraw this deferral motion and let's discuss these items that we want, and then at least we then have something we can think about, and then come back with second and third reading in the next one. But I'm not sure, I was kind of where...
As such, I don't think we can get there if we don't defer. I mean, honestly, the rules of council that we had all over all of these years, you cannot rediscuss it at third reading. I mean, discussion's over.
I don't think that's correct.
That's what you
We're going
passed
to check with
second.
council on that. Councilmember White.
You know, just procedurally, think through sort of step by step. I'm not, the outcome to defer is to sort of allow some additional time for outside discussion. However, what's going to happen is we're going to defer. We're going to sort of talk onesie-twosies because we can't talk all together outside of this public forum because we will have a quorum. So what's going to happen then is it's going to come to the floor for additional debate. And we will then continue to debate it, and then at that point, we're either going to give a second reading and defer to third reading because we still haven't figured it out, or we're going to possibly all agree and give it a second, third reading, and you still only earned yourself 2 weeks. But the reality is that tonight, it's fresh in our minds. We've just spent 2+ hours debating, or excuse me, not debating, but in a thoughtful discussion. And I don't know about y'all, but for me, now is the right time to further discuss it and go through those items. I think if we defer 2 weeks, and with all due respect to my colleagues at the end of the table, I think we're going to be back at the same spot. I do. I think so. So giving a second reading, talking about it tonight, having a firm, I think, good sort of discussion on where we're headed, come to a conclusion on the items we can come to a conclusion on tonight, and come back for a third reading, I think is the right way to go. But I think if we defer, we're just going to basically end up doing this exact same exercise with no conclusions 2 weeks from now.
And I might share, just from a procedural point of view, last year when we did the BAR changes in all the height districts, we did a second reading and then waited to come back for third reading, and we made changes to the ordinance in between. I mean, we're not disallowed from doing that. I remember us doing it that way last year. I think Councilmember Moody was next, and then Seekings. Councilmember Moody?
My point of order was I thought we should discuss it tonight, basically.
Yeah, right.
Councilmember White.
Councilmember Seekings?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember White. I think he articulated it accurately. We need to go through these points. They're not that voluminous. There's 5 of them. I wrote them down. We can talk about them, see if we can give some direction to staff, give it second reading, keep it moving forward. And to Councilmember Griffin's point and everybody else's, including, and Councilmember Greggy, this whole enforcement, and Councilmember Lewis, let's let staff know in which direction we're going. Not only that we're going to put the enforcement infrastructure in place, but what they're actually going to be enforcing. And the further we get down the road debating these issues, the more focused they're going to be able to be in their hires and their software and all those things to have in place when we finally give it third reading. Then it's going to be up to them to go do it. So let's let them know what we're thinking. Let's let the public know what we're thinking. Let's debate this.
Councilmember Mitchell, and then let's call the question.
Madam colleagues, you can call the question afterwards, and if I have to withdraw my motion, I'll do. But the thing is that we sit around this doggone table here, and I said, I'm out in that community more so than a lot of people. In my district, I'm talking about the people I represent, and dealing with housing the way I see it. I don't have a problem with the short-term rental, but I want to make sure that the people is going to be, that the people are not going to be forced out their area that they're living in, who was living here, who are Charlestonian, which I'm one of them. You know, see, we sit down and talk, but we are forgetting about the people are underserved. We have seniors living in these areas I work in North Central, the East Central, East Side, and these places, even Wagner Terrace, that they will not be able to afford to stay where they're staying now because of the elevation of what's going to happen to these houses that when they go up in value. It's going to go up in value when the short-term rental is there. Don't let nobody fool you. I've been in housing for 33 years and dealing with that. It's going to go up in value. This is the city of Charleston. So now, are we looking at the Charleston as a whole? Just because one foot's over here, that don't mean you're going to foot over there. And that's my dilemma. One don't fit all. So we have different zones. Are you going to deal with them separately, or are you going to deal with this one big umbrella? That's my problem. It's the problem I have. I'm not going to see nobody lose their home in these various areas in the area that I work with. I was elected to make sure that they're comfortable, that they're going to stay in there, and I'm going to do that. And that's my dilemma. That's why I said deferred. I want to make sure everything is in order. So when I have to go to them and get beat up from them, I can say, well, I did it because of this, that. I can't say that right now. So I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable, and that's what I'm saying. And I don't have a problem with short-term rental, but I want to make sure I feel comfortable doing what I'm doing, and I can go and explain to them.
And we want you to be comfortable.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think that's the overriding reason that the task force recommended that only residential properties where someone who's a homeowner living there is even allowed to do this.
Mr. Mayor,
I think that's the overriding reason.
I fully understand you, Mr. Mayor, but like I told you, when you go down to Peachtree Street, San City Street, those streets are area was strictly residential. Those people do not, a lot of them do not want to do it. They don't want it. That's what happened in the neighborhood association at North Central.
And that's great.
East Central. So this is why I'm saying I want to make sure that I'm going to have to be able to fight that battle.
Yes, sir.
And I got to feel comfortably fighting that battle with them and say, I did it because of us, so this.
Right. Councilmember Gregory.
Mayor, I keep wondering why my ice is not as cold as other people's ice. Because we've come full circle. I'm where you are. I'll vote on it if we've got some stuff in it right now. That's what I said initially. Let's have something to vote on. So I'm ready to discuss it and start doing the amendments and moving forward. I'm ready to get something to eat.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to defer.
Can we get a ruling from our lawyer as to whether or not we can do this on a third reading or not? The question was...
We can make changes on third reading, can we not?
Make changes on third reading with unanimous consent or with prior notice. And with the BAR is that we knew between first and second reading we were going to have amendments, which we did, and we knew between second and third reading that we were going to have amendments, and we gave notice to council that what the amendments were when they were coming forward, and that allowed us to amend on third reading.
Right. It has to have unanimous consent then.
So we tonight say we're going to have a discussion on these 5 or 6 items, put the draft in there and say we can further in 2 weeks, and that be the notice, and say in 2 weeks it'll bring back for discussion and amendment if necessary third reading.
So if the direction to staff tonight, y'all discuss what you want, and if you say you could give it second reading with these amendments, and then you bring back those amendments on third reading, and if you want to see them in writing, before second reading, then you have to wait. If you want to see them in writing before third reading, you can certainly get that to you between now and then.
Writing for me.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to defer. Can I ask all in favor, or did you withdraw the motion?
Withdraw the motion.
We withdrew the motion.
We have
I
discussion.
have a motion to
On the
give
floor to
second
approve it
reading
to where it is.
to the task force. That was my motion.
And I second it.
So now we can debate it. And
Now we can debate it.
I second
Okay.
that motion.
We got a motion on the floor to accept what has been presented to council in your packet that you've had since last Wednesday, which was essentially the task force recommendations for short-term rentals.
And I'd like to add one amendment, and that is Councilmember White's amendment, which he discussed last time when we debated this for the first time, to change the requirements, which would now include Daniel Island, so there could be some short-term rentals there, which was the year requirement on Daniel Island.
And my suggestion would be just basically in Class 3, removing the proviso for a year period completely.
For
Class 3.
For any year,
Just
there'd be,
remove it completely. I don't
Okay.
think we're legislating an issue that doesn't exist on that one.
so,
Give me that sentence, Councilman.
Let me come back. I got to find that.
Which year?
It is under Class 3, page 11, delete item 5, which states, "The STR unit shall be located in a building constructed 50 years or more ago." Just strike that entire sentence, item 5, remove. Only for Class 3.
tell me what page and number that is?
Page 11.
Page 11, number 5.
5.
Okay, everybody got that? Can y'all see that? That's what he's amending this document. And we're going to take more than one amendment. Let's vote on them one at a time, and then we'll decide whether we can get the second reading or come back to you with a written version. Yeah. We need a second for, okay, we got a second here.
Repeat the motion.
Strike.
Okay, he's proposing that on page 11 that we delete number 5. And so that this is in Class 3, that there would not be any, you'd do away with any requirement that a building had to be, in other words, you could build a building tomorrow in Class 3, and it could become a short-term rental as long as you live there.
Live there.
As long as you live there. You still got to have everything else apply, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can we discuss just this one amendment? Eric?
I fully support this because in my district, I don't think I have any properties that are 50 years old either. I'm glad you brought it up last time because you started talking about Daniel Island and I started thinking, well, Shadow Moss didn't come in until the 70s and it was really the first piece of property out there and all this new development around it. It would almost completely eliminate District 10 like District 1, so I'm right there with you. Thank you.
Councilmember Shade, did you
Yeah, I
have
just
your
want to make
hand
sure
up?
that what we're looking at is section 54208.3, which deals with Class 3 short-term rentals under A5, that be eliminated. So if there is new construction that comes after this ordinance is passed, that new construction can be retrofitted, for lack of a better word, so it accommodates the violation we're trying to avoid happening. But as I heard from staff, and I heard from members of the community, that if you have new construction, we don't have the ability to regulate what goes on in the interior of that new construction. So the 50-year may not apply, maybe too restrictive for Daniel Island and parts of West Ashley, but if we put a restriction in there of some term of years, either 1 year or 5 years, that would address any type of housing that is coming up that would do an in-run on this violation.
I don't understand.
If I could just respond, I think two things to that. Number one is there's a lot of new construction. I think about it. I got a house, it's 2 years old. I got a frog. There's an event coming up and I want to rent it out VRBO. I live in the property. It's 4%. I'll be on site during that period of time. I'm going to rent the frog out for a weekend. We need to allow those people to do that. That I think is a entitled right to somebody who, because it's not an impact, there's parking, so on and so forth. But I think even more so in this particular case, what it was trying to legislate in Class 1 and 2 doesn't exist in Class 3. The demand is not there. I'm in the business of investment real estate, and I can tell you that I would no sooner go build a special purpose building for short-term rentals in West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island, Daniel Island, because the demand would never be there. So that's why I say I think what we are doing in this case, in item 5 under Class 3, is simply trying to legislate something that doesn't exist. I'm not saying it won't ever, but certainly doesn't today.
And Mr. Lindsay, remind us, just make sure I'm clear, that, quote, Class 3 is everything outside of the peninsula, correct?
Not exactly, sir. It's actually everything that is not in the Old and Historic District and the Old City District. So in effect, it's all the areas off the peninsula and the areas on the peninsula north of about Line Street.
Okay.
So it does include the West Side, Hampton, Park, Terrace, all those areas, Wagner Terrace, those are in Class 3.
Okay. I just want to make that clear.
And that's sort of what the problem is, I think, Mr. Mayor, is that, I understand what Mr. White and Mr. Griffin are talking about, and I understand that, but we're also, I don't want to create another class, but we're going to create a problem in those areas that are defined by this geographic Class 3. If it just applied to Daniel Island or the newer parts of West Ashley, I would be more comfortable with this, but it's not. Am I correct on that?
And can I make the suggestion as well, additionally to that, that was brought up to me earlier during one of the breaks, that Wagner Terrace, which I did not realize originally was in part of Class 3, but I would contend that Wagner Terrace is really not defined similar to Daniel Island, James Island, or West Ashley, or Johns Island. It really needs to be in Class 2.
Right.
So I would suggest that by making this change in Class 3, one additional note that we need to address, I'm not asking that we do it all at once, but I think that Wagner Terrace, I think anything basically in the neck area through the city that connects
Everything
to
north of Line Street.
everything north.
Line Street.
That really
In
is
Class
where
2.
the line, no pun intended, should be drawn in Class 2, because I don't think that they define
All
the
the way
same as
to the
Class 3.
North Charleston line.
Some consensus on
Yes,
that?
sir.
Yeah.
We would remove Class.
Just add all the peninsula up to the North Charleston border between the rivers in Class 2.
Okay. Does that sound like something we can do?
No, everything on the peninsula that's not Class 1.
Can we,
And then Class
do you
3
have
is
that
off
map,
the
Mr.
Yeah,
Lindsay?
that's what it says.
I do not have the map on me. However, I'm going to need our legal counsel on that matter.
Order, please. What is that you want to ask?
I need somebody in the back over there.
Not planning.
Ms. Cantwell, if you come forward and join us. So, but that's about the question of changing the zones.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So the question, for instance, council is minded to extend Class 2 to include the whole peninsula beyond just the old city. And the question is whether or not you think that's a good proposition or a tenable proposition.
Thank you. She said yes.
is it legal?
I mean, that would be an amendment, that you would say change the boundary of Class 2 to whatever.
Good.
Or shrink the boundary of Class 3.
Okay.
So that would just be an amendment we have to
So another amendment we would have to do. Okay.
Let me ask you,
Just change the map.
Okay, we change the map.
Would it, because what we're talking about has some effect, and by removing this with Class 3, should we maybe take up the changing of the class boundaries first and then come back to that item, just so everybody's comfortable?
That's a good idea.
Or do you want to do it, I mean, I'll accept that as an additional amendment.
So moved.
If y'all would rather just do that, and we move the boundaries for Class 2, that includes the entire peninsula, Class 3, or, excuse me, 2 and 1 are the peninsula as defined, and then Class 3 is everything is in the suburbs off of the peninsula, and then subsequently removing item 5 from page 11.
Right.
There is one more item of clarity that as we're discussing, is there an intent to have an age requirement in Class 2? In Class 2 on the peninsula?
Yeah.
We need to hear that, I think, from council as well.
Class 2 is 50 right
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no
Right.
change in that.
Right.
Just Class 3.
Just Class 3. Okay, so we now got two amendments. One would basically change the map so that Class 1 and 2 are on the peninsula, right? And Class 3 is everywhere else, okay? And so Class 3, but the first part of the amendment was that the age requirement on Class 3 would go away. So anything off of the peninsula, if you built it tomorrow, you could, as long as you lived there and followed all the other rules, you'd be able to do a short-term rental.
You gotta be able to park it.
Okay. Does that sound like consensus?
The consensus.
Okay. And so if I could suggest to you, we continue going like this, and I think it would be better just because, you know, getting every word down and all like that, that we would rewrite it and send it to you again before we have second reading. I think that sounds like the...
So far,
most-
easy. Just have to change the map and take out a line.
Yeah, yeah. It should be easy, but I want to make sure that we're all in concurrence before we approve it. And we got some more things to discuss. So now we got another amendment you want to bring forward, Councilmember Gregory?
Please discuss it because by removing us from 3, that means everything in 2 would be applicable to Wagner Terrace and everything on McMurray. Okay.
That's right.
Now, the question for me is, do we keep the 50-year provision in 2? But 2 now also includes the old historical district, right? Am I correct? That's why I'm saying neighborhoods are very important for us to be able to consider.
Mayor, can I just address that one? The one thing, Councilman Gregory, that I think about with Wagner Terrace is the protection of properties to not be constructed for this purpose. Certainly, the demand is there in the old historic district in Charleston, but I would contend that the demand is probably potentially there, if not today, pretty soon in Wagner Terrace. So I think, yes, I think that leaving the age in 2 is well, obviously for the rest of it, but it's certainly justified in Wagner Terrace.
Yeah, most of them are 50 years.
So Councilmember Gregory and council, the way it reads right now on page 10, number 4, Class 2 does require that a building be 50 or more years ago old. So it's there right now, unless y'all want to change it.
Well, I mean, it gets to the same point that Councilman White was making. While we don't have that many opportunities to build in Wagner Terrace, there really aren't that many areas. If someone does build new and wanted to, they couldn't. They'd have to wait 50 years.
Right.
Before they can participate.
That's right. I see a lot of new homes being built up that way. Right, they're not 50, so we're limiting the availability by keeping this provision in there. So that's part of the point, is to keep a lid on it, right? Okay, so let's leave it there for now, and if between now and we come back.
But we can review it again.
Okay.
Now, the parking is a little different in 2 than it is in 3 also, isn't it? Or is it the same?
Okay.
It's different.
Before we move to parking, since it's somewhat related, could we go ahead and just discuss the National Register requirement in Zone 1? Because it's kind of related, isn't it, to our discussion so far? Well, it's even more limited in Zone 1 because you have to be eligible or approved on the National Register, right? Does anybody want to change that? You had mentioned, I thought, that you thought that was too severe.
Yes, I have heard from people that, would not be eligible for that reason. To be honest, I don't remember that I heard there's only 47 nationally registered properties. So I think that's an even larger point to consider in some ways, that it's like we're allowing 47 properties to be short-term rental properties. Some of those are probably already historic house museums that would not even, choose to have that. They're not residences any longer. So it just seems that if we're going to agree on paper that we're going to allow the residents of our most historic, most popular destination part of the city to entertain short-term rentals, then we can't make it so restrictive that it's just to those pristine properties that have gone through the effort of being on the National Register. I was interested to hear that the task force member who testified in front of us said that it was actually our staff who suggested that designation because it would be another easy way of eliminating properties. So we have heard individually from people who would be unable to rent their properties. They would qualify on every other level in the same way that Mr. White was talking about the new construction on Daniel Island. I mean, I live on James Island. The people that I've heard from want to rent out their parents' house and it's an investment at this point. So I'm counseling them that long-term rental is going to be a fine way of maximizing your investment. We need housing, permanent housing, and rents are going up, unfortunately, on James Island. It's no longer a startup housing area any longer. So I do think that we need to consider what are we trying to, if we're really just sort of putting it on paper and checking the box, then what's the point in even allowing short-term rentals at all in the old and historic district?
I got you. Well, let me just ask Mr. Lindsay one thing. The bed and breakfasts that are already in existence will continue.
Yes, sir.
Right? They may or may not be on the National Register?
That's correct.
That's correct. So kind of it grandfathers in all the existing bed and breakfast locations. And I hear you that this is most restrictive, and there's a few folks I'm sure who would want a short-term rent that won't be able to, but it seems to me the preponderant response from the neighborhood leadership is that this would be, that they favor that level of restriction.
I understand that. I mean, it is the golden seal on not having, the opportunity. I personally think that we are establishing.
Can I order, please?
The main requirements that are going to prevent the majority of people or limit the majority of people are the fact that, first of all, they have to be 4% renters. And I know we're all concerned about the number of people that don't live permanently in Charleston. And then they have to be in the home when the visitors come to rent any available rooms. And then the parking in that district is already challenging for the people who live there permanently, let alone want to have guests that would be regulated. So I think those two things, the owner occupancy and the parking, are really what we're going after in terms of restricting the use on any sort of volume basis in the historic district. And to me, I've already said, I favor the equity that at least not having that designation provides to people who are in that area with all the same house attributes, and they just don't have the plaque on the door.
All right. Councilmember Griffin.
In order to answer that question about the historic registry and Class 1, I would ask Councilman Seekings. I mean, I've met with a lot of your residents. They don't really want short-term rentals at all.
They don't.
So to be very, very restrictive in Class 1, that's going to make them happy. And that's what we need to remember. We have a very diverse city. What Councilman White and I want off of the peninsula in terms of age limits and stuff like that is different than what these guys want over in Class 1. So if we're going to, try to be unanimous about how we do these amendments, and I know that a lot of your constituents had a big part in the task force, and they were very adamant about what they wanted over there. I will go with your judgment on that we got to be very restrictive over there.
Thank you.
Can I ask for a non-binding vote on a show of hands, how many would like to remove the national, Sure.
Where did that come from? Did it come from staff, or did it come from the task force?
Well, I don't know where it originated, but the task force certainly considered it.
And the reason I'm asking is
yeah.
because, with Councilwoman Jackson, because if I'm not mistaken, initially that 50-year was applicable in Zone 1 and 2, and then it changed to something different. I just want to know where it came from.
I fully support the 50-year, which is the baseline requirement for putting your property on the National Register. I think that's why, to me, it seems, punitive in some regard. We'll have the 50-year restriction. I mean, I would entertain a higher number of years if that would help in terms of identifying the properties that are primarily in the historic district.
When we had the old B&B rules, your house had to date back to 1850, was it? So that was very restrictive as well.
That's very restrictive.
Mr. Lindsay, if I may.
Mayor, my memory of it is that the task force asked the staff for a strong regulation in the Old Historic District, and we suggested that. They then endorsed it, and then the neighborhood subsequently felt pretty good about that as well. That's my recollection of it.
That's where it came from. Seeking
Councilmember White had his.
Just one quick point to that is, the deeper we get into the peninsula, clearly the demand is much more significantly great. The pressure on trying to keep the character of those neighborhoods alive is what we have to be most mindful of in this. The other thing is that, so being very, very, very restrictive is important for a couple of reasons. One, 50 years, everything is. Everything's 50 years old. It's, and even if you said 100 years, we're still, but the other thing is that we got to keep in mind is that properties that also are in the accommodations overlay, although they have to go through the hotel process, they still can be a short-term rental. So if they're on the peninsula and they're in accommodations overlay and they're in Class 1, but not on the historic registry, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can still go through the process because of the accommodations overlay.
That's correct.
So if you just use the years as a component or a function, it's really not an apples-to-apples comparison to the rest of the peninsula, because as you go up the peninsula, of course, the accommodations overlay is less and less as you go up.
That's a good point.
Councilmember Seeking. Lots of excellent points, and I don't want to belabor it. I mean, I will just say, from the staff, through the task force, to the planning commission, Anson Borough, Charleston neighborhood, Halston Village, the French Quarter, this was the least controversial thing in this. Everybody agreed on it from the get-go.
Okay.
This is something that the neighborhoods want. It's going to work. We got hotels all over the place downtown. I would ask that we keep that right where it is.
Right. So, but we're just covering all the items that people recommended, thought about potential changes, and this was one of them. So I don't know if some of this conversation satisfies you. I hear your point, but do we have a consensus, most of us, to leave it in place?
Yes, sir.
The requirement?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm a lone voice on this, so.
All right.
I will
So
not.
at this point, we'll leave it in place. So let's talk about the parking next. There was a discussion about if you're providing an on-site parking space, that it be, quote, maneuverable. And there was some question as to whether that really was made sense or not. Councilmember.
Yeah, that was one of the issues I addressed. I think if they can provide for off-street parking, I think that should satisfy. Whether they have to move cars around, I don't think we ought to get down in the weeds like that.
So I think we could handle that by just removing the word maneuverable and saying that you had to have X number of spaces and let the property owner worry about whether somebody had to back out of the driveway to get their car out of the way.
Agreed. That would be across the board, all.
That would be across the board. Councilmember Moody?
I just wanted to make one point. I had made a comment about some inconsistencies here, and I talked with Mr. Lindsay, and it seems to be a little bit of a concern which one may be right, and I just want to be sure, some kind of assurance that Jacob has talked with the person that I've given him the name, and that to be sure they're on the same page, that the wording is consistent throughout the thing as to how many rooms, how many bedrooms, how many parking places. That's all. I just wanted some assurance that y'all have gone through that and that we don't have that inconsistency.
Yeah, to
Yes,
that
sir.
point, Mr. Mayor, I do think that if you read the paragraph 5 on page 9 that describes how you get to the parking for Class 1, and then compare that to page 10, paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 on page 10 in the Class 2 talks about bedrooms, and it doesn't mention that in Class 1. I think the definition of STR is a room, but I do think that we should make that very clear. Yeah.
We'll reconcile those two things.
Yeah.
The reason that it's called a unit in the old, it's because it's consistent with the previous ordinance. We'll make sure that they're all
Yeah, just make sure
unified
they're all the same.
and the language is clear across the different districts.
Yeah, the only other part about parking was, I think Mr. Waring mentioned that city lease, a 10-year lease that we don't have.
Let me finish on maneuverable first.
Okay.
Okay. Does everybody feel like removing maneuverable is a good idea?
From all 3 classes, right?
From all 3 classes? You got that, Mr. Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to get rid of maneuverable, and people can figure that out. Okay, now about the 10-year thing, and I must admit I was a little, we're not asking anyone to provide off-site parking or even requiring that, are we? Yeah.
Mayor, the way it's presently written, the ordinance does not allow for off-street parking, or I'm sorry. Off-site parking to meet the requirements for a short-term rental in the way that it's presently written.
So even if you were next to a parking garage, you would not be able to lease a space in a parking garage to meet the requirement to get your permit. That's the way it's written right now.
We want people to go in the garage. Why would we not want people to go in the garage? What's the thinking behind that?
So for commercial uses, as you know, someone can meet their parking requirement by going off-site within a certain distance and certain parameters. And the way that the old B&B system had been written, you couldn't do that because the idea was it had to be on the residential property. And this is really a holdover from the way that was written.
I understand that. I understand it being a holdover. That's the part I think we should change. I think if somebody's close enough to go into a garage, we should want them to go into a garage, whether it's a holdover or not. That's all. I mean, to me, it seems simple. We let hotels go in the garage. Why would we? The key thing is to get them off the street.
And if I may, council member and to mayor, should council be minded to make that change, we will come back to you with I'm putting on my Lee Batchelder hat. We'll be coming back to you with language that will have to prove that in fact the user would go into the garage. We just have to have them account for where the car is going to go, but we can certainly do that if council's minded to.
Thank you.
So, but I just got to ask the question, doesn't this allow a property owner, if we're trying to keep a lid on all this a bit, to qualify for more bedrooms and more availability by providing off-site parking? Is that what we want to do?
My understanding was when they had the off-site thing, it had to be within a certain amount of feet or something like that, 400 feet or something like that. How many, by the way, it's probably going to happen in a commercial district. And that overlay district, how far does that go up? Is that in Class 1? Is that on the map anywhere up here?
The accommodations overlay is not shown on this map. Okay. The accommodations overlay, if you can put it in just visually, is about from Line Street, you know where Line Street is, and it goes down King and Meeting, and then it turns to the Market. So that's roughly the accommodations overlay. It's the center of the city.
Other than that, it's in spots. Yeah. But anyway, my fear of allowing off-site parking is what I just described, that it might allow folks to get more capacity in a home where they might not have otherwise. capacity for short-term rentals.
And I am getting way out of my lane here, but I would ask that council hear from Ms. Carducci, who manages our parking garages, because our policy has been, and I know that a short-term rental is a form of a commercial use, but the policy has been not to allow off-site parking for residential purposes to be in the garages because the residential use doesn't turn over, so it affects essentially the cash flow from the garage. Now, this is sort of a quasi-residential use, and I hear the discussion, and certainly it's up to council to do what you will, but I think that if you might want to hear from Ms. Carducci about how that might affect the availability of parking for transients downtown, which is what we try to keep open.
Councilmember Griffin.
Correct me if I'm wrong, in all of our garages, there's a sign, I don't know if it's 48 or 7, it says if you're going to be here longer than 48 or 72 hours, please call this number, because you pay some extra fee or so, I don't know why it's there, but I guess it's to prevent people from parking in there for long amounts of time.
And we try to encourage turnover.
Councilmember White, then Jackson.
Along the parking lines, I just wanted to get some clarity. As it would appear, the parking requirements in Class 1 would be less restrictive than Class 2. And so I'm trying to understand why the difference, but more importantly, somebody shared with me that the outcome of what is in here, the recommendations for parking, are not what came out of the task force. But yet earlier we asked that question and the answer was, no, this is what came from the task force. So can I get some more clarity on, just to make sure we all kind of understand exactly what we have, why the restrictions would be less in one versus the other, particularly now?
Yes, sir. So I agree with you that it does not read as clearly as it should, which is why I want to commit to making sure that the language is consistent with exactly what the task force recommended, unless council is minded to do something differently. And the reason for that is because of the definition of a unit versus a bedroom. And Lee Batchelder, in writing the final version of this, used unit for the old and historic district because that's the language that's consistent with the previously existing B&B ordinance. And in that construction of it, the unit should only have one bedroom, thus making the old and historic district the most restrictive. But we will make sure that those things are aligned and that it reads as one space per bedroom consistently, if that's what y'all want to do.
I just really want to make sure that it just didn't, the way I read it, just didn't seem to make sense.
I agree with you, and we'll make sure it's corrected.
Okay, so we're going to agree to standardize the language regarding units and bedrooms and parking among all three districts when we come back to your next meeting. And but we're not going to allow, unless I hear a consensus to the contrary, for off-site parking to qualify. You want to go back at that?
Cantwell did say we need to speak to Ms. Carducci on that, so I mean, I think I'm going to leave that open to hear from Ms. Carducci. We don't have to vote on it tonight.
No, we're not going to vote on it tonight. All right.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, sir.
Just mainly because I've just gone through an exercise and having some conversation with Ms. Carducci about some of the parking garages, and although we need more parking garages, and although there are spaces in them today, I can assure you that if we were to allow this and then we give long-term leases to and start chewing up some spaces in these garages, I do think that we're going to run afoul on being able to turn these spaces over as much as we want.
That's what I mean. I'm not talking about long-term leases. The city talked in terms of 10 years. I'm trying to get away from long-term. So you can have turnover.
But if you didn't do it long-term, how could we prove then that they provided the parking? Because we need to be able to know for sure that they have it available.
How would you define long-term?
Well, I mean, at least for the period of the permit.
Okay.
The permit's an annualized basis, and so you do it year over year over year.
I think the city does do annual.
Yeah, whatever, I mean, I think it would minimum have to be tied
So I think
I think that I need more discussion on that one. I mean, not here, but I mean, outside.
That's fine.
Yes, thanks. If we're going to have more discussion, then I would just like to be on the record for tonight to say, I do think that we need to focus on the point of the bedrooms being tied to the parking as one of the ways that we're restricting the number of bedrooms that can be rented out in any one district. So if we would allow them to say that they're putting cars away from their site, and they have a 5-bedroom house, we have five different rooms rented out. So I do think the mayor's point was made that this combination of parking and owner occupancy is really the key to keeping short-term rentals at a minimum as we start out on this.
Gotcha. All right. So there was also the issue of 40-foot width of the property. Only in Zone 1. So is that something that we want to keep in there, or do y'all care about that strongly? Explain that one thing to us again.
So, Mayor, what that says is that the property must have at least 40 feet of width, adjacent to the street, adjoining the street. Right. And that was something that was created by a prior group that studied this a number of years ago, and it was essentially something that could, help to rule out the number of properties that would be eligible. And it's an older thing that dates back some number of years. Right. My personal feeling is that this issue is going to solve itself on the basis of the fact that everybody who comes in is going to have to submit a site plan showing where where their cars go and where the rental is. So I personally don't feel like this issue is going to be critical one way or the other.
If I don't have 40 feet in front of me, I can't participate.
You're correct.
That's correct.
It's an additional hurdle that has to be jumped.
So it seems to me it's reasonable that if we leave the National Register requirement in, that's enough. And that we don't need the 40 foot. I mean, you only got so many properties. Okay, I think I went through the ones that I had noted. Do y'all have any others? Yes, sir.
Rudy had brought this up, and I would take on the very last page on section 16, in which we talk about the ordinance shall become effective 90 days after ratification. I would add that this ordinance shall be subject to review of its enforcement provisions 9 months after ratification.
Okay.
No, 9 months after ratification. Yeah, that would take the 30 days. Yeah. So
how many days? How many months?
9 months. It said this ordinance shall be subject to review of its enforcement provisions 9 months after ratification.
Okay. Okay. That's a good one. All right. Any others? Okay.
As
So
amended and debated for second reading.
you're going to do what?
I'm going to amend my motion to move as amended and debated for second reading with instructions to staff.
Okay. He's moving for second reading with those changes, with those amendments, but they're not in.
I want to make sure.
I can give you a summary of them.
Ability to debate this again at the third reading.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, show a pretty good look back and forth, look at the lines, and take out this line, take out this word, or whatever.
Right.
I'd just like to be able to do that on the second reading.
Right.
But your motion is
when we got started, I was kind of thinking we'd come back to you with the written text, and I frankly would like to think we could give you second and third reading together once we do this. It's going to be 2 weeks from now, no matter what. So,
Then at a minimum, I motion this comes back to us in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. No question about that. Okay. And what we're going to put in there that's going to change, Zone 3, we're going to remove the 50-year requirement. We're going to change the zone map so that Zone 2 is all the rest of the green part on the peninsula, right? We're going to leave the National Register requirement in there. We're going to remove maneuverable from the parking. We're going to, I don't think there's currently an off-site parking provision. We may talk about that point later, another time. But, so we're not changing anything with regards to that. We're going to standardize the language on parking and bedrooms and units amongst all three zones. And we're going to remove the 40-foot requirement, and we're going to have a 9-month reporting period. Does that sound all good? So, yes, sir.
That sounds great.
Yes, sir.
But you, at the first meeting, we had a side-by-side, a
Right.
little cliff note. Can we have that on this one? Thank you, Mr.
Okay. So is any further action needed at this point?
Who will we get that amended? Will it just be in our next package, or will we get it before that?
I'm going to have my staff work on this first thing tomorrow. I mean, we're going to, if y'all want to give us a reasonable day, we'll try to get it back to you. I mean, and
Friday is some people will be taken off for Good Friday and it's Passover. Let's say by next Monday.
Monday it is, sir. We'll get you
Okay.
edits by then.
So that would be prior to when you would normally get it. I think enough time for everybody to review it. Okay. But we're almost finished. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
We do have some some other items up for second reading. So let's take a 5-minute break. Is that good? Yes, sir.
I think we need to defer the item.
Oh, okay, now we need to defer the item. We got a motion to defer in a second.
All right, so
Defer with amendments according to Corporation Council is what I'm trying to get your attention.
With amendments. Thank you. Okay.
can I
Move with
one other
amendment.
Since we're deferring and we're basically losing 2 more weeks,
Yeah.
we've already budgeted for these officers, we've already budgeted for this software. I think it's pretty certain we are moving forward with this. Can you please instruct staff not to wait for 2 weeks to move forward with any administrative things they need to do in order to get ready to
Right.
execute this? Let's go ahead and keep pressing forward on this.
I'll step out on that. I don't think it has to be part of the motion. Okay, all in favor to
Just so I understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
The motion is to defer, and staff is instructed to bring back an ordinance with the amendments that y'all talked about.
Monday.
Well, you would have it by Monday, but
Yeah. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let's take a 5-minute break. No. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next is M1, bills up for first reading. We have some modifications to the wording of the Commission on Women. We got a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is a proposed ordinance to promote civil sidewalks on King Street between Line and Broad and on Market Streets. Do I have a motion to approve?
We don't have a motion, we need a motion.
We got a motion from Councilmember Lewis and a second from Seekings. Any discussion on this?
Can I get a definition of a civil sidewalk?
What is causing that, y'all?
I think it's, Mr. Mayor, I think they get too close.
Oh, okay.
They bump each other.
I see.
I knew it.
Thank you. I should have known that. Testing. Okay.
So anyway, if I can just, I just don't know the difference between a regular sidewalk and a civil sidewalk. An uncivil sidewalk and I think we want mostly civil sidewalks, I'm pretty sure. But I just, all kidding aside, I would like to know what that is.
Ms. Cantwell?
It's a term of art that has been applied to sidewalks and other ordinances that other cities have passed where they address sitting down and lying across the sidewalk. So the idea being is the sidewalk is for walking and for pedestrian activity, and it's not any different than any other sidewalk, but it's a nomenclature that has been applied to these types of ordinances that address sidewalks in this way.
The first thing you said was art?
A term of art.
That's a legal term.
Oh, sorry, it's a legal term. Janie?
Just remember they get paid by the word.
Okay. Any further?
Janie was instrumental in drafting this ordinance. You want to address the term civil sidewalk?
I would agree with
She gets a raise tomorrow.
Well, that's being mighty civil of you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments about this ordinance? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, we have number 3, which is a rezoning, I think, isn't it? Of 7 acres on the West Ashley Circle. Councilmember Wagner.
This is the 7 acres we talked about, 2 weeks ago, and we talked about earlier about 18, 20 hours ago in here, or it seems like it at least. But bottom line, this is, it's almost a triangle. It's, the tip of the triangle is West Ashley Circle. One side is Floyd Drive, the other side is Bees Ferry Road. Its proposed use is it looks like self-storage units, about 90 of them, it looks like, plus 90. Then a restaurant, commercial areas facing West Ashley Circle, with one of them on the Bees Ferry side. Right behind it is a large area of wetlands, and we'll have a significant detention pond behind the self-storage units, from what I have been told. So, under that scenario, since it's predominantly commercial on a relatively large lot, it's going to be probably about 80% wetlands anyway. I don't see where we have a problem with it. Talking to me about this, Floyd there. Here's West Ashley Circle, here's Beach there.
Okay.
And the detention pond is back here, and the rest of that's wetlands that'll never be developed. So I would move, we move for approval of this one.
You got a motion to approve. There's a second. Councilmember Griffin.
Okay.
I've met with the landowners on this. They want to build a Staples right there. Other than that, though, I just went running by that.
That's the other side. There's one more that's out there that's still deferred. That's where the Staples was.
Okay, well, I don't know about a storage facility up there right now either, but more importantly, I went running through there a few days ago, and there was a considerable amount of water on that land.
Yes.
Which concerns me, that we're going to move to rezone this and then they be able to move forward with some sort of building or get ready to go there when it's wet.
Anything but gathering place. It's zone gathering place right now, so basically anything goes. That's why taking GB and the baby in the bathwater, we don't throw them all out together. Let's get rid of gathering place.
Okay. Councilmember Shealy? Councilmember Jackson? Thank you.
If it's not going to be a Staples, then, and I know it's not, we can't find out for sure, but do you have any inkling on what they're planning to put there then, Mr. Wagner?
It's a Ruby Tuesday place restaurant, and right behind it is the relay, so he's got.
Okay.
You're still here.
I learned a lot in the last debate, and I don't want you to have to go through it again. The frontage along the West Ashley Circle and Beast Ferry will be restaurant and retail. They've got an Atlanta Bread and maybe a Ruby Tuesdays. It's to be community restaurant to serve the community out there. It's taken a long time to get online, the neighborhood commercial, and this is part of it. Across the street, they're going to do that Harris Teeter Center, so it's all going to be fairly cohesive, and the self-storage will be in the back. And as Councilman Wagner said, there are wetlands, but there will be significant detention, and only a portion of the property is being developed.
Thank you. So no residential, sir?
No residential.
Councilmember Shealy.
I have a hard time wrapping my head around why we're changing from gathering place to general business, I guess. And I'm opening up a can, I know.
Go back and read some minutes.
All right. Okay, all right. And I guess the other question is this within the basin right now, or is it? Yes. It is within.
It is within the basin.
Okay.
But they have development rights presently. This isn't going to really significantly change it. And it might remove a residential requirement, but, if you want some more residential, I got a couple hundred apartments down the street that they want to build.
But this is in the Church Creek Basin, however, it is not within the 100-year floodplain, which is the area which, we have the moratorium on. So, yes, it's in the basin, but it's not in the floodplain.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. I think that's it, other than to tell you we're getting together again. Boy, we're going to spend a lot of time together this week. Hey, at Dock Street Theater tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Oh, at 4:30 we're having a reception with the ambassador at Dock Street.
Mr. Mayor.
He's doing a presentation for us, and then our workshop meeting is 9 o'clock on Thursday morning.
Can I just make one statement before everybody walks off?
Real quick.
For those of us who attended the commissioning of the Ralph Johnson, a couple questions, a couple points. Well done to all the city members and staff who were involved in that, and your address, Mr. Mayor, in particular. But also, I just wanted to share one piece of information that I received. I took a tour of the boat, and it was a petty officer who took us around. We spent about an hour with us, very knowledgeable young man. At the end of the tour, he said this to us. He said, we thanked him for his service and the members of the crew. And he looked at us and said, I want to thank you, the citizens of Charleston, for coming out, because we don't get this kind of support on a regular basis. And that just spoke volumes of who we are as a city. I think there were about 5,000 people attended that ceremony. And and I told him that we are a very military-friendly town, but I just wanted to share that one thought that he had with us. And we don't do enough to thank our military, but that was just a wonderful show of support. All of us being out there and the citizens of Charleston being out there, that we were supporting not just the family of Ralph Johnson, but we were supporting our military, and we need to do more of that. And I just wanted to share that thought
And
with
if
you.
I may, a lot of folks helped out, but Rick Giroux sitting over here really followed that thing all the way through. He did a great job marshaling our efforts on that. So without any further...
Well, one thing, you did a good job. You did a good job tonight working through that short-term rental. So, I mean, I wanted to say that.
We stand adjourned.